This is Avantes.
This is Zoroshio.
And this is Versica.
Catch us every Wednesday night on the Hero Power Podcast at 7:30 p.m. Eastern at heropowerhs.com.
And don't forget to use your hero power
Right before you coin concede.
Greetings.
Hello.
Greet my greeting.
Well met.
I greet you.
Greetings, traveler.
Greetings, friend.
The pleasure is mine.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 143 of Coin Concede, a Hearthstone podcast dedicated to making the competitive side of the game more accessible to you. I'm joining you live from Gadgets in New York. It's me, RidiculousHat, and boy, do we have a jam-packed, super fun episode waiting for you. We have brought along our anchor, our co-host extraordinaire, our legend ladder grinder. We have Botticus from Karazhan, California. Botticus, you did not ask permission if you could have a soundboard. I am the one who soundboards.
Hi, Hat.
Botticus just made his own soundboard. He was like, this is going in the show. I don't care.
Well, I couldn't figure out how to actually get the sound effect from Mossy Horror, the greatest card ever, on my phone, so I had to play it off a YouTube video, but I felt like we needed to have that intro for me this week.
I admire the incredible amount of effort you made for a throwaway gag. I could not be prouder and happier of who you've become as a podcaster. And joining us from the Maelstrom, Louisiana, we have Team Crescent member, Hearthstone professional, all-around good guy, Appa.
I think that's the most, accolade-loaded you've ever introduced me on the show.
Yeah. It seemed appropriate this week. And we have some international presence on the podcast this week. All the way from the Valley of the Four Winds in Japan, we have Rob from Velen's Chosen. Welcome, sir.
Morning, everybody. Or evening, where you guys are at.
Yes, well, it's evening, but like the day before, because you're from the future.
Future. Which one?
We're still doing that, apparently. I appreciate you memeing with us. Thank you so much for... Oh my god, so many whispers. Yes. And the old gods are involved with Pandaria, so it does make sense that their whispers have come along. Rob, as I was saying before I got witch-witted, thank you for coming on the show. And we want to talk to you for a little bit. But first, Coin Concede supported in large part by you, the listener. If you'd like to find out how you can support us and receive rewards in return, head to patreon.com/coinconcede. Now that that's out of the way, well, hey Appa, you're already so loaded with accolades. I figured that you would be the best person for the task of getting to know our guests and helping our listeners get to know him too. Do you want to ask him some questions?
I do want to ask him some questions.
Marvelous. Take it away.
All right. First question. Hi, Rob.
Yo.
That's not a question, but hi.
Yo.
So, I guess first up, for those who may not know you, just give us a little background on who you are. What do you do in the podcasting realm and with Blizzard Games? And just let us get to know you a little better.
For the very few of you who listen to Coin Concede and don't listen to Velen's Chosen, I do that podcast as well. I do Hearthstone podcast. Been doing it for about 3 years. I'm also just finished up our second year of doing Overwatch podcasting with my good friend and yours, Andres Gomez, who used to be here quite a while, helping things work, running the gamut, doing some editing. Now we're shooting people in the heads, and mostly Andres is doing that, and I'm kind of in the back line playing support. I've been doing podcasting a long time, at least in internet years, not necessarily in real people years, but we're getting there.
Is that implication that internet people are not real people?
It is as true as you want it to be.
I respect
have you ever spoken to an internet person? They talk to you nobody talks to you like that in real life. Somebody's just go. Oh my god! Have y'all seen Nate Wolf's tweet from earlier today. That dude added him and told him to get off the streets and join society. Because that's not real life. Like,
I mean,
who speaks like that?
Are we using rage ads and in-game conversation as real life in any format?
No, there are examples of internet people. That's our
and how
point here.
they don't act like real people.
I concede the point.
To answer the question in the chat, no, I do not eat natto, and there's good reason, because it smells like the back of a gorilla and a baboon at the same time.
All right. Anyways,
Wait, what is this thing that you eat that smells like butt?
Natto, Natto. It is something they put in sushi, eat by itself, add to rice. It's like really slimy, like freshly cut okra, and like real slimy, and it's basically fermented soybeans.
And I was gonna use that.
Really popular here.
Yeah, I was gonna use that as a springboard to ask, what's it like living in Japan, and what are you doing over there? Also, how is your internet situation?
We'll start with the natto situation because I'm definitely not eating that. But I did have some sushi before the show because it was on sale at the supermarket and pre-made, so I don't have to do it myself. Living in Japan's been pretty nice outside of a few different situations. I'll probably let you guys ask more things about that if you'd like. Been here. This is my third year living here. We have my third-year contract is actually starting the beginning of next month, in August, and I will be hopefully applying for a new job to stay here. But it's a little nerve-wracking. I'm hoping to stay in the country, but I need to hopefully. My plan B is to stick with the organization I'm with right now to keep teaching, but I really don't want to do that. I would like to stay with high school and try to find another high school somewhere else in Japan. But it's kind of sad because my wife got a really great job in the same area. And unfortunately, if I were to stay in the same area, in rural Japan, there's not a whole lot of options for me. And I do have to move anyways. So it is what it is. But the internet situation here is really interesting. Not sure exactly why. I'm still trying to figure out some things, but I have a really fast high-speed internet that I'm paying for, but because we first got here, it was going to take like weeks worth of planning and setup and investigation of our apartment and drilling and setting up schedules to get them to come in and install a high-speed internet. That we decided to go with a Wi-Fi unit that was literally take it home, plug it in, you're done. And I had internet the first day I got here, so I was like, yeah, that sounds good. I'll probably just pay for 2 internets after this first year, but boy, was it miserable playing Overwatch on that internet. And anything that requires actions per minute that isn't Hearthstone, playing with a Nosdormu and Freeze Mage at the same time. But yeah, that's to give you an idea. That's kind of what the internet situation was, and I don't know why, but it hates Skype and it hates a couple of their Steam games and blocks them from the ISP, which will hopefully be changing when I move to my new location. But I think that's probably it. Talk more about internet than I talked about Japan. It's a wonderful country. If you're asking, are you near Tokyo? Are you near Osaka? No, I'm nowhere near them. And any type of person that asks or complains about me in our podcast for iTunes reviews has been like, some guy living in Tokyo, and I'm just like, you didn't even listen to the show, buddy. So your opinion is now invalid. But we had some good discussions internally about negative iTunes reviews and people whining about me in particular and claiming that I'm having a rough life. No, I really enjoy Japan. It's quite fantastic.
So what you're saying is you enjoy living in downtown Tokyo.
Is there a leave button to this call?
It comes at the end of the interview when we ask you if you want to do a podcast with us, you just say no.
Oh my god.
Oh, I have the option. Okay. I'm glad the meme's still alive.
So why is your handle NotRob?
Funny story. So back in 2009 is when I got a Twitter handle right around the time that I finished high school. And it was a blast to learn about Twitter because I learned that all of my new college friends were there and all of the people that I was trying to run away from in high school weren't. And I stopped using Facebook as much and used Twitter a whole lot. And one of the first podcasts that I have ever listened to is The Instance with Scott Johnson, Patrick Beja, and Randy Jordan. Randy is now long gone from the show, but Patrick kind of pops in here and there. And Patrick's handle on Twitter was not Patrick back when the thing started and Twitter started. So getting new handles was pretty easy on a new platform. So I jumped on it and copied it and just did NotRob and kind of stuck. And then I started slowly over time converting and leaving games and converting new titles to NotRob as the tag. And so I just stuck with it. I'm just like, make everything that. So we did. And ended up doing some branding for a personal photography brand before I left the States because I didn't know I was going to get the job in Japan. If I didn't, then I wanted to have some sort of media brand to shoot weddings, do some photography or video, work with some people. So I had built up a little bit of a repertoire there back in the States, but luckily it didn't pan out so that I could actually have a real job instead of some part-time freelancing. So it was kind of a win-win.
So how did you get into gaming in general, and then like Blizzard games specifically, and Hearthstone, and even Overwatch? And I just want to kind of combine these two questions together.
Sure.
Like, I know obviously you spend a lot of time doing probably research for Velen's Chosen, gathering guests, doing all that kind of stuff. So like, what has kept you in Hearthstone? Because whenever I was playing a lot of Overwatch, like half a year ago, like really playing a ton, it was really hard for me to find time to do both. So how do you kind of manage that?
Well, first and foremost, I'll start with the general introduction to gaming because I basically had a Super Nintendo when I was really little, but played the original NES as like my first console. With a friend, I would just run over to his house all the time. We'd play. And then my other friend had a Sega, so we kind of just slowly migrated to that. Played pretty much everything. Some of my first games were Super Mario Collection with Mario 2, 3, and then there was my first fighting game, which was a blast. It was Ninja Turtles Tournament Fighter 2, I think is the very first game, which is funny to have your first fighting game be a sequel, but it was. And it was glorious and still is, and you can get it on an emulator today if you'd like to try it. So I played those and then slowly kind of moved out of it. I ended up buying my own consoles after having N64. I bought my first Xbox, and then my parents gifted us a GameCube around the time before that. So I played stuff like that. I love platformers. We talked to Wicked Good, one of our admins and Off Curve host. We've talked about platformers for eons, and big ukulele fans, which is a rare game. Like basically the people who made Banjo-Kazooie for N64 got kicked from the program, or they got canceled, and so they did a Kickstarter and made a follow-up game to Banjo-Kazooie franchise, and they called it Ukulele. So Banjo-Kazooie, the ukulele, they stuck with the whole motif of two main heroes on top of each other, and one being a flyer, one being a grounded, and it was really fun. So that's kind of like my introduction to gaming was mostly platforming. And then I ended up moving into shooters and Halo era. And then played a lot of WoW. After Halo 2 into Halo 3, I switched over to PC gaming. Played a ton, way too much to the point of ostracizing myself from friends, which we talked a little bit about on an episode that you guys referenced last week, actually. So I won't go too much more detail to that. Then transitioning into college, I literally played nothing. I didn't have any time for it. I did nothing but study and work on my degree and friendships, and then I would pick up a platformer or something fun to play with roommates here and there. We played StarCraft game modes together on the weekend every once in a while. Picked up WoW for the summer, picked it up for Christmas break, and then canceled it right away. Just like little things. But I played games like Braid, Portal 2, some simulation games just for fun to escape from studying environment. But most of the time I was trying to like network and get good friends and hang out with people and do things instead of gaming for a change, just to experience that lifestyle. And I was also part of a soccer team for about 2 years. So that ate up a lot of time for training and conditioning and practice and all that. But then moving from there into the Hearthstone scene, I picked up Hearthstone in closed alpha when I was in grad school and loved it immediately. But I wasn't very good at it because I used to play Yu-Gi-Oh! Way back when. I played lots of competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! Tournaments like weekly in my local card shop. And I dipped toes into Magic, but my parents were pretty conservatives at the time, so I couldn't play a lot of Magic, but I do know how to play it now. I've dipped my toe into Commander a few times. I got pretty competitive with a very particular style, which we'll go into later, but I don't want to belabor the point. Getting into like how you maintain playing Hearthstone now and playing Overwatch now, I just kind of picked them up when I found them, really enjoyed them, kind of went full tilt into playing them as best I could while I was in the grad school education, also trying to get married and engaged around the same time, so you can see how much of that took a backseat. Not the marriage, but the gaming. So we had a lot of fun doing that and introducing that to some friends. And around that time, I actually found a group of people that were doing something with the Angry Chicken podcast on their Reddit. A small group of people that were like doing weekly game nights and Google calls with like 10 people, and they would schedule it every week. And all we would do is goof around in playing. It was kind of weird. How do we describe it? I think Eve would describe it a little bit better. We've gone to play some fun stuff like random decks, but you could only pick like 2 legendaries from your collection, and then like the rest would autofill. And then you could play, and then you'd match up against somebody in the group, and you'd do round robin, King of the Hill. It was really, really fun, and we'd all spectate each other and make fun of each other when they came out with the new spectator tool. It was a lot of fun because we'd have to use the in-game client when we had it, but this is way before you could even spectate players. We'd have to like go into a Google call and like screen capture what you were doing on your screen, and it was a lot of fun because we'd even do ladder sessions too on smaller weeks. So it was really, really cool. We did that, and that's how I met Eve, and I met Andres, and I met Brian, who used to run Hearthaholics with Andres. So, but moving into when Overwatch started picking up, and we kind of had the big shuffle of lots of people moving into creating new shows and doing things alongside, playing Hearthstone and Overwatch is impossible if you want to be good at both of them, I think. I think you have to choose one, and Appa, feel free to interrupt me anytime because this is your baby as much as it is mine. It is impossible to be good at in the highest or in the top 10% of a game consistently without taking a hit somewhere else, whether that be in life or in another game that you're trying to be good at. And the only way to really maintain that is to make that your career. So if you're not doing a day job, or I would even venture to say, even if you're working only part-time, it's still pretty difficult. Because you have tasks to do around the house, you have real life concerns that you need to be doing and operating in. So unless gaming and streaming and being a pro in one game is your livelihood, you're not going to be finding any other free time to do anything else. That's why you're seeing Overwatch professional players and Hearthstone professional players in their free time, not just streaming the game that they play for a living. They relax by playing something else. And you know what I do is I don't necessarily play to relax because I can't relax. I'm a workaholic. So my relaxing is by doing something else. But I will say, as of recently, I shouldn't say as recently. It's probably since splitting off and doing 2 shows. It's been my primary concern has been Overwatch, and the reason being is that I finally came into epiphany, as most players do, that also create content, that you don't have to be good at what you do. You have to be good at producing your show and making it interesting and bringing people that are experts on when you need them, and or having one of them like Watchman and Eve on your show that can cover that base for you. You don't have to be that as long as you have them with you. And 2, if you don't enjoy it, you don't have to play it. And if you don't enjoy it, you can still talk about that. You can still have meaningful things to engage in a conversation and do something. So I know I'm going on a long monologue here, so I'll wrap up. But that means that I've been going into playing Overwatch a lot more, especially when they roll out new features. I feel like it's not that Overwatch or Heroes or other Blizzard franchises do things at a different pace, because if anything, being overloaded with news I feel like Warcraft and Hearthstone get the least amount of total news because there isn't a whole lot of wiggle room for them to fulfill that need of rollover. And in all of the other Blizzard games where they roll out things that are at a faster pace, at large, the community that is in the casual base is always upset because it's too fast. So that being said, people are like, oh, it's too fast, or I only do my 10 games of placement games and then I play like 10 games over the season. Like I found that for people that play Hearthstone, the casual player base is considered anyone that isn't hitting rank 5 consistently or rank 10 consistently. That's kind of like your casual player base. And now it's kind of shifted into a completely different dichotomy with the new ladder thing. It's just basically anybody who doesn't play X amount of games a month. If they're not playing at least weekly or even like daily, then they're not considered a casual or a casual tryhard. So it's kind of like you have to figure out what labels you're okay with if you want to produce content and play games and play the games you want to play. There's been weeks where I don't play any Overwatch. And there's also back-to-back weeks where I don't play Hearthstone at all. And I'll skip Tavern Brawls. I'll skip daily quests. Gasp. I'll skip my daily quests. And I'll even just go into what's called the Player Handbook for Dungeons & Dragons and do some reading instead of gaming. So it's been fun. I've been doing a lot of Dungeons & Dragons and watching some really cool people there produce stuff, like Matt Mercer, who's the voice of Nefarian and Ragnaros, the Fire Lord. I've been watching him do Dungeon Mastery for his D&D group with a bunch of other people, which include Liam O'Brien, who is the voice of Illidan Stormrage, and Laura Bailey, who's the voice of Jaina Proudmoore. So some people and voices that you may recognize, but they run a D&D campaign that's really cool.
I have so many thoughts right now. My current one is, how cool would it be to play a D&D campaign with literal professional voice actors?
Right?
That would be amazing, and I appreciate your honesty. So last week in Velen's, I know we talked about it in the Coin Concedes last week. You should go listen to that episode on Gaming Addiction. It was super well done, and Rob takes a tone, along with the other hosts, that's even more self-analytical, even more insightful than here. But still, it's important to note that your relationship with the game is what you make it, what you can handle, and what you want. And I can speak to when I was playing Magic the Gathering on a quasi-semi-professional level. Everything else suffered, and when I try to do anything else, Magic suffered. There's a lot of need for practice to be a professional or in the top 10% or even higher up, and a lot of times these professional windows are top 0.1%. Even getting close to that takes such a huge time investment, and trying to balance between two games is near impossible. So props to you for recognizing what makes sense for you, and that the energy that you spend on Velen Chosen can be making it the best show it is, as opposed to making you the best Hearthstone player you can be. Because I think the best Hearthstone players don't necessarily naturally make the best content. It's a lot of work. You can speak to that more than anyone, and everyone in this universe knows. If you want to make a show that looks good, sounds good, and has something relevant to talk about every week, that takes a lot of invested energy, on top of having a day job and a relationship that matters and friends that matter, and also time for you. Because also when you're making content, time playing the game that you have to talk about isn't always time for you. That can turn into time for someone else. And that can be sometimes a difficult interaction to manage, that when the game that you play primarily turns into something that feels like work. What do you do? How do you find the joy behind keep playing it, and how do you keep yourself playing it? And Appa, I know you were using Overwatch for a while as your game of fun when you were having a little bit of difficulty engaging with Hearthstone.
Yeah, so I was using it as like my chill out game. Like, you know how you have that game like when you get frustrated with Hearthstone or something, and then you like go play something else, like just chill out and have fun. I was doing that with Overwatch, but then I started playing Overwatch so much that I wanted to like start getting better at it. So I started investing a lot of time into that, and it kind of became that both games started feeling like chores every day. And that's around the time when I was also working overnight shifts, stocking stuff, and also playing like 4 or 5 hours of Overwatch a day, 4 or 5 hours of Hearthstone a day. And I was just like, something just has to give here. I just need to like step back and like collect myself, because it was really mentally taxing, honestly, like trying to be good at both games at the same time. So I just had to step back and take a break, and that's why I stepped back from the podcast for a while. But since then, I haven't played as much Overwatch because I mean, I'm just better at Hearthstone, and I don't know. I don't think. I think my skill floor or my skill ceiling is like close to me, like hitting it in Overwatch, anyways. So I just kind of like went back to Hearthstone and was like, I just need to drop trying to be good at Overwatch, and now I'll play like 2 or 3 games a season or something just for fun.
Yeah, I mean, I can even tell you guys from a production standpoint and or a planning and maybe even a framework building type of a format for making a podcast and making a show and preparing guests and schedules. Some of the worst episodes that we've ever made have come across from the weeks that I've played the most and like enjoyed the game even the most, just because they're just not good shows, or they're not. The difference between a good show and an average show is really not that much, and the difference between a good show and a great show is a hell of a lot. And it has to, like, knowing myself, I know that if I'm going to produce a good show, there has to be a sizable amount of scheduling and effort and work, in the sense that you need to know who you're bringing on, what questions you want to ask, lots of experience that goes into it. And then you're not just like bricking on questions or reading a monologue. Like, that's a very thin balance between having everything possible that you would want to prep for something, and then having the wherewithal and the likelihood of adjustment to completely cut out entire pages worth of plans on a dime. That has been some of the most difficult things to learn over the course of the last 3 years. And I feel like my first year of Velen's really laid a lot of groundwork of mistakes in a good way to plan for Omnic having such a killer kickoff, and such a good framework to go into, because we planned well. We knew our niche. We knew exactly what we wanted to do. We knew exactly what, we knew exactly in our own minds what people would be looking for, but we weren't quite sure if it was going to be that. And then it turns out that it was a good idea and everybody started listening. And then we picked up a couple of good guests to kind of help us get kind of off the ground, and here we are. But sometimes making good things doesn't get you a whole lot of recognition, as I'm sure if you could start like getting the comparing game or start making content and you're getting a couple, like 50 or 100 or even just only 1,000 listeners that you're kind of around, you can produce a lot of content for that. You just have to make sure that the people you're attracting are worth your time. And what I mean by that is the time that you spend on producing something should be not like it should feel sacrificial in the sense that you're sacrificing your time and energy into putting something together, because otherwise it wouldn't mean anything. But it shouldn't feel like what you are making is crafted and made for someone else. It's more of like, I like to craft a lot of the things I make as if I was sitting on Google and I'm like, I want this now, and nobody's making this, or even if someone's making it, I want to make it with my version. And so if I'm doing that, then all the sacrifices that are made are no longer feeling like a sacrifice, even though they are, if that makes sense. Kind of like a labor of love idea.
It's the difference between getting rid of time and investing time, right? It's the difference between what's the value of that time and who does it connect with, and is there someone out there that you know will be enriched by that, or even a small but consistent, steady audience that is really finding value from the work you're making, and then it enables you and encourages you to make more work in the same vein. It is really rewarding and powerful and meaningful in that you get these small groups of people that come together, and even if the audience stabilizes, that's good enough. And in the case of Omnic Lab, you all have done exceptional work over there in terms of not only maintaining an audience, but growing an audience. I've never played a game of Overwatch. I've never installed the game. I've never opened the game. And I listened to a podcast where you and Andres identified characters by their actual footstep sounds. That says a lot about the quality of the show. And that episode, by the way, was awesome.
It was a lot of fun to make, and Andres really enjoyed it. We also brought that back for our 2-year anniversary and did it again. That was a lot of fun, too.
I gotta go listen to some more footsteps from a game I've never played. Thanks, Rob.
It's more of a like fun trivia, too.
Yeah. Well, it's like listening to people who are good at their craft that also engage with the game and clearly enjoy doing it, and you can kind of see where all that energy goes. But speaking of where energy goes, it goes into the first half hour of this episode being talking to you, Rob, and we love talking to you. But the most important question hasn't been asked yet. Horde or Alliance?
Okay, I have to lay the groundwork so that all of the Alliance people don't hate me for saying for the Horde. So that's the short answer.
We can still do the show. That's wonderful.
So I started on Horde, and where the heart starts, the heart stays, as far as I'm concerned. I played the most on Alliance side. The most time and hours I played on Alliance side, I was Draenei Shaman. And I played primarily Lich King, which I played Enhancement in BC with a little bit of PvP on Restoration, back when the Earth Shield was mad busted, and then switched over to Elemental Shaman, where you can sling lightning and lava and burst things like... You thought Lava Burst in Hearthstone was broken? Let me tell you, you should have played it back in Lich King when World of Warcraft was around. Let me tell you. Whew. The ability had an auto critical strike feature, and then added an additional like glyph or modifier where when you hit the crit would double the crit because of a certain condition being met. And oh man, every 6 seconds running Lava Burst was almost as good as discovering 2 Lava Bursts from your abilities in Hearthstone and burning somebody down for like, I don't know, 19 damage in a turn. Just out of nowhere. It's fantastic. So I played a lot of raiding in that. However, our guild was just really, really solid at the time. Lots of good people, lots of friends that I actually kind of stayed in contact with. Yeah, I switched back to Earthen Ring and moved a bunch of characters around, came back and played only Horde with my wife for the last little bit of Draenor. But yeah, I'm an Orc Shaman now. And that's how it's going to stay, because I'm not going back to the game that I used to play, unfortunately. But yeah, Horde for life, for the Horde, ladies and gentlemen.
Well, you definitely picked the best class, so I'm proud of you.
I did.
It's every part of your answer made one of us happy.
It's like so boring to play anything else. Unless you're going to play a mage and you're just going to nuke things with fire, that's pretty close. Slinging lava and lightning's where it's at, though, I have to say.
Well,
I had one more question, and don't go too in depth on this, but just 3 of your favorite animes.
I own all of the English manga for Death Note, so I would be remiss to not say it. I've also watched it the most. My current favorite anime that's in the title is Steins Gate. And the one that I'm still working through right now and is not overhyped is Boku no Hero Academia, or My Hero Academia.
Sweet.
Cool.
I have an entire list if you guys want one, and I can give it to you.
I know that he has the list. He gave it to me, and I have had no time to watch it at all. Unfortunately.
But
can I get some Vohayos in the chat?
Yes, let's get some Vohayos.
Mostly because I've been playing a lot of ladder.
Speaking of ladder,
tell me about it.
Speaking as Rob, this is welcome to Rob Concede, where Rob does Rob things, and we come along for the ride. It's a wonderful thing. Yes, Botticus, please tell Rob about
ladder. You guys ask
ladder.
the questions. I'm going to keep going.
I want you to keep going. That's why you're here.
So this week on ladder, the season finished last week. I was kind of low legend at around the 2,500 mark when I started, and ground up with Malagos Druid. Got up and finished around in the top 5, within the top 500. I was thinking about pushing more, but then I'm glad I didn't, because Nikolaius said that he started around 350 and had to win. He went 9-1 to finish in the top 200. So I only had an hour and a half left when I got safely into the top 500, and was glad I did not try to push even harder for that because I had a very up and down day. But Malagos Druid, really good, plays to my my likings of different decks. And then now after the ladder reset, I found there to be a bunch of aggressive decks, and I've always needed to learn how to play Taunt Warrior. It's not a deck I've ever felt comfortable with, so I picked up Taunt Warrior. I've been playing it, and it's really good against the decks I'm expecting to face. Not so good against even Warlock and combo Paladin and some of the other decks, but it has games against everything.
What?
OTK Paladin. I for some reason I played against it twice the other day, and I don't think it has any good matchups except for Quest Warrior, especially since whenever I see a Paladin, I assume it's Odd Paladin and mulligan away the quest because your deck just beats them without having to ever lob Ragnaros shots at their face. But not so good against OTK Paladin, who's trying to play Uther and then make a bunch of 2/2s that kill you.
See, and here I thought that matchup didn't exist.
Well, it doesn't, because that deck shouldn't exist, but I get to play against it, so there it is. But that's been my week so far, playing Taunt Warrior. I'm enjoying it. I'm starting to get the hang of it, so I don't have to exclude it from a lineup like I did last time when it was in the best 3 lineups that Appa tried to give me for Austin.
Yes, Appa, why don't you talk about how frustrating it is to try and get Botticus to play good decks?
All right, look, I spent so much time crafting these sweet lineups, and I'm like, look, these have nutty win percentages across the board. Here's the top 3. And he's like, I can't play Quest Warrior. I'm like, yes, you can. He's like, not doing it. So he didn't. So
that deck is not that intuitive. It can be pretty complicated, and trying to figure it out is hard, okay? I didn't want to be making up stuff on the fly when I'm playing for wins at a DreamHack that I went to. I didn't think that was a good idea.
Anyways, as far as ladder goes, I'm not going to talk about the end of last month because it was super feels bad for me. But this month, I just been kind of messing around with different stuff on ladder. I've been shying away from the harder decks in the format, I would say, with decks like Malagos Druid, Shutterwalk, even Warlock, those kinds of things. I haven't played so much of those, partially because I wanted to climb quicker last month, and partially because they're hard and they're intimidating and they're spooky because they're hard. So I've been kind of diving headfirst into those and trying to learn the more complicated decks in the format.
That makes sense. Yeah, now is definitely a good learning time, and also because the meta is all over the place, and it's maybe the most dramatic end of season reset shift I've ever seen without a balance change coming. Rob, how much have you been playing?
I actually played a little bit this week, which we'll get into later, but I've been playing a little bit of Zhou today. Played like 3 games because I found Zhou took a little bit of a revival. Also was happy to hear that even Shaman has not died, although I had some conflicting evidence from that. But I'm going to be playing a little bit more in that vein. I did it for prep for this show and for my next show tomorrow, 2 days for Velen's. But yeah, I mean, it's been fun. I also found an OTK Druid list for the Tavern Brawl this week, which is stupid because I never played a game in the Tavern Brawl where someone wasn't playing it. Which is kind of strange to see like a meta in a game where people just want to grind gold and they just play an OTK list, which is kind of strange. But
yeah, for some reason I couldn't stop playing it once I started. I got 30 wins yesterday, and I have another 15 wins so far today. It's just it's nice to just go so quickly, and you either get a turn or you don't get a turn, and if you get UI'd on turn 1, you can just concede and go on to the next one.
Right.
And everybody's playing it, except for one person was playing Paladin with the
Rebuke.
2 mana card with Rebuke.
Yeah.
And then they killed me on turn 2 with a Bluegill Warrior that got Blessing of Kings and then doubled its attack. Yeah.
Oh, like Buster Champion?
Yeah, I mean, like playing it in the Brawl, I was literally only doing it for the pack, and I got to the first game, the guy just left. He was playing Hunter and didn't even play the game, and I got my pack, and I was like, I have a quest still left over from Toki's time where I have to play 35 spells, and I'm playing Zoo that runs double Soulfire, and that's it. So this is going to be a long day unless I go to Tavern Brawl to finish this thing. So I went to Tavern Brawl, and like then the next game, I top deck UI the first turn, play UI, and the guy concedes. I was like, come on, dude, I need to play some spells. Come on. And it was just like, it was really amusing, like having this dialogue in my head, and then like zooming out in the apartment, kind of like an out of body experience, and just seeing me like in the silence of the room, just like click, 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 and like all this internal conflict screaming inside your head. It made me laugh out loud because I was just like, this would be some like scene from a movie where you just see like this person arguing with themselves in the head, like super frustrated, and like nothing's actually happening. So I thought that was funny.
The internal conflict of, I need the gold, but I'm doing degenerate things to my opponent with the turn 1 ultimate infestation. But how dare they not let me?
I mean, I don't really care that they don't let me. I just like, I'm actually like trying to see how many APMs I can get or how many cards can I play before I drop UI, and then maybe it'll work. So I'm going through like all of these things like, how do I get them to understand that I'm not good enough to win the game until it's too late? And then they're going to hit the concede button. I can maybe get 6 spells out of this one.
Rob, when you're ready, you can get those quests in friendly challenges now. We'll do a Tavern Brawl, and you can just UI my face all you want. How about that?
That sounds good.
Yeah.
As you can tell, playing from Japan doesn't mean that there's a whole lot of friends online usually, but having your day off means that you can go hang out with Hat for at least 10 minutes a day.
Well, our sleep schedules overlap on the other end of the day, but let's not talk about that now. Speaking of terrible sleep schedules and ladder finishes, so the end of the month experience in Legend Ladder is awful, and I don't know how people do it every month. It's really unpleasant, super high pressure, and you're just constantly jamming games, except it's like, if you're grinding from 5 to Legend, but every time you win a game, you get a star, and every time you lose a game, you lose an entire rank. That's kind of how it feels like, and it really isn't great. So I hadn't really pushed high Legend finishes all that aggressively before I started around 700 Legend. I'm like, it won't be that hard. I'll play Miracle Rogue like I've been playing all season. Nope. The beginning of the last day and the end of the last day is not the same meta. And at the beginning of the day, people are pushing with more slower, control-y stuff. They think it'll be the highest win rate. At the end of the day, they're like, I gotta get games in. Hit you in the face. Odd Paladin. Odd Paladin's not a good matchup. I lost a bunch. So I went from 700 to 2,000, and I said, you know what, I'm not going to do this anymore, because it was like 245, and the season reset at 3. But hey, I got a Golden Sea Giant, and now I am on the quest to, I'm on 2 quests. The first quest to learn Shutterwalk Shaman. The second quest is hit a 50% win rate with the deck. Both are in progress. So big thanks to Robobson for helping look at my replays and telling me, this one you got high roll, this one you got high roll, this one you played poorly, this one you played poorly, this one both. I appreciate that. And we're going to stream it after the show and just try and continue to learn Shutterwalk Shaman with a card that is a 6-mana 2/7 that destroys all minions with attack 2 or less in the deck.
What card would that be, Hat?
Called Arms.
Called Arms.
Oh,
yeah.
God.
See, the thing is sometimes I'm the Call to Arms and sometimes I'm the Mossy Horror. So I gotta take my wins when I can get them.
You got a real wide range.
Oh yeah.
No, the range on both of those is about 2 attack.
Yep.
So this is kind of an awkward segue, but
So it's here, everybody. The announcement of the announcement has occurred. It looks like DOT Esports received a little teaser for a save the date of July 12th, 2018, which is when we're all expecting to be getting the announcement of the next expansion. So I'm pretty excited about this, as I know a lot of people are. What do you guys think? What does it mean? It's a green hand with a fruit and a Hearthstone symbol in the middle of it. What could that mean? And also, why is the date backwards? I assume that's because it's
European.
European, Australian, everywhere else that's not United States.
Yeah,
time.
we're the backwards one. Let's not be Americentric here.
So there's a green hand, and there's what looks like a fruit or vegetable. So I'm expecting a VeggieTales crossover.
It's
all right.
That seems reasonable. My theory here is that they're gonna announce something about Hearthstone on July 12th.
Got it. All right, great. Perfect. I guess we can go on to the next.
Or it's so if I were in charge of Blizzard's marketing department here, what I would do is I would do this, and I would both announce the next expansion on July 12th and also release the next expansion on December 7th, and you could reuse the image and save the money. It's half price.
The most interesting thing to me is that this image is seemingly in direct conflict with Expansion 2's expectation predictions that 90% of the community has come up with.
Which ones? The ethereal predictions?
Well, ethereal, Nexus, and Arakoa predictions that a lot of people have been saying. But yeah.
Right. So for context here, the expansion graphic at the beginning of the year, where it talked about Expansion 1, Expansion 2, Expansion 3, the one in the middle, the second expansion, was this kind of glowing pink circle, which typically corresponds with either the Draenei in World of Warcraft or Ethereals, which are...
Ethereal Gateway.
Yes. Go ahead, Rob.
And the backdrop looks more like, if you look at the bottom section, it is pretty much a direct screenshot from Netherstorm in past Draenor land, however you want to look at it, where the entire area is destroyed. However, the only thing I can think of is that in Netherstorm in World of Warcraft, there's zones, these like eco bubbles of arcane energy are preserving these like wildlife preserves inside, where there's lush environments, like beautiful waterfalls, wild growth. There's even like lashers, which are like these flower attackers. You have them in Rogue and in Hearthstone, and panthers, and like even small civilizations where the ethereals are kind of just setting up shop. And this mango being in the hand of either an orc or a goblin, I can't quite tell. Looks more goblinish, honestly, than orcish. But it could be that we're going like ethereal, but kind of like those little ecocentric things might be a little bit more of a mainstay than maybe I was thinking. And the other side thing could be that this Hearthstone is more... Man, I can't even honestly say. I think that this is a teaser for Save the Date being more centralized around summer and fruit and kind of like fun. And maybe this is the event that comes with it. And then the ethereal is more of the cards themselves. I don't know. We did have 2 game modes back to back in the last 2 expansions that were pretty similar.
Well, I love the speculation because I'm really terrible at speculating on stuff like that. So it's good to hear other people's perspective on what they think. But I believe next week we are going to try to record on the 12th so that we know what that announcement is. So I'm excited to see what happens that date. The next news item we have here is what you missed from HCT Summer. This is an article with a bunch of information from what happened at HCT Summer from the Play Hearthstone website. We're going to be discussing that in depth in the tournament section, so I won't go into it too much, but we have a link in the show notes in case you want to check that out. Another big piece of news here is the upcoming minion type adjustments. It looks like a few of the creature types are going to be getting updates, or a few of the minions will be getting updates. The Molten and Mountain Giant are now going to become elementals. The Witchwood Piper is now going to be a demon. North Sea Kraken, that heavily played card in Constructed, is now going to be a beast. And then the beast tag will be removed from Jungle Moonkin, as well as Witchwood Grizzly getting an art update to reflect the fact that it is a beast and look a little less ethereal. And then, of course, there's Hat's favorite portion of the patch, which is they have now alphabetized Alakir's keywords and put Divine Shield on one line instead of two. So essentially, this is the greatest patch ever. The only thing I will say is I was listening to a podcast today, and I wish I remembered so I could give them credit, but they brought up a good note that it seems like Arcane Giant also could have become an elemental as well. So it's kind of odd that they left that one off of here. They also brought up Sea Giant, but I can see how Sea Giant doesn't necessarily look as elemental as obviously Molten and Mountain Giant look. Hat, what do you think of this patch? I already kind of spoiled your thoughts on the most important part, but what can you tell me about this?
So, obviously, the alphabetization of Alakir's text is just maybe one of the best improvements the game has ever seen. But the change to Witchwood Grizzly's art was unbearable, and they really barely needed to change anything at all. But instead, the art just kind of suffered this grisly demise, and it's a really polarizing reaction that I don't think they needed to have.
Are you just reading straight from our Discord right now?
No, this is all from memory. Yeah.
Right.
And I don't mean to Winnie the Pooh on the new art, but it's definitely just it didn't need to change. I don't think. I just wasn't expectraling them to change the art so dramatically.
My god. Oh my god.
Appa, save us. Anything from this patch? Just
expectraling killed me. That's the last straw. You've lost your mic privileges, Hat. All these changes are super cool. I agree that Arcane Giant should probably be an elemental because we got like Arcane Tyrant is an elemental, and shouldn't the Giant be an elemental too? But Sea Giant, I don't really care about. I feel like he's not an elemental. He's just like a big old fish-looking thing.
But he's still played. I don't know. That's like why does his home have to keep him from hanging out with the other giants? Like why not him? Why not Sea Giant?
Don't have a response to that.
Why not all giants?
There's a lot of giants in Warcraft, folks.
But are they not all elementals?
All of them are not elementals. A lot of them are not.
So does this
change? wow.gamepedia.com/giant.
So does this change reflect the World of Warcraft lore to a T then? Is Arcane Giant not considered an elemental?
I will tell you two things. One, I don't know. And two, there is an ability that mages have in World of Warcraft, at least at one point, either they or priests or shaman, I can't remember who it is, but there is an ability, I'm pretty sure mages have it, called Banish Elemental, which basically is a crowd control effect that lets you take an elemental of a kind and like phase them out into the planar existence that they're from, and they can't be attacked or damaged for a set amount of time until it breaks, and then they come back in and you can attack them again. And I do not remember being able to do this when I was in the Karazhan raid against the Karazhan Arcane Giants. However, you could definitely do this against the Molten ones, and that's all I can tell you.
Got it. All right. Next piece of news here, we have Hearthstone is going to be part of the second largest multi-sport event known as the Asian Games in 2018. Just a little note here from the Play Hearthstone website if you want to check that out. I'm sure we will cover it in the tournament section when that happens, which is going to be later on this year. Looks like August 18th. The next news...
What's the first largest?
I don't know. I should have looked that up. I thought about looking that up and then didn't.
I'm sorry for letting everyone down.
All right. So the next piece of news we have here is the Legend matchmaking improvements should be live now in July. I know this was something we talked about last week a bit. They had tweeted that they were going to do something. I hope that it has already happened, but it's hard to tell because there's just not a lot of Legend players right now, and the end of the month last month was pretty rough. It felt like as soon as I crested outside the top 500, I started playing rank 1 non-legend players fairly regularly, and we were kind of thinking that it might have been a bug or something going on, but it seems like it was just the way that the change back in, I believe it was 10.2, changed how you reset at the end of the month. Eventually people started clumping up at different ranks, and that affected MMR or whatever, but I'm excited to see this month, see how it changed, see if it feels better. I know I just know that it'd be better to play against legend players more often when you're legend. So I think it's going to be a good change overall, assuming if they do it properly.
Yeah, all I know about that is I peaked at rank 212 legend, and with a 64% win rate, I ended up at 4,000 legend.
I didn't love this statement. I'm glad that they committed to making a change. It was still pretty opaque. There wasn't a lot of detail here. And I don't know if we need Blizzard to go into everything, but this statement was a non-statement for the players that were currently struggling, saying you won't experience this again in future seasons, and this season is just going to be the way it is. I get that they can't change it, but there wasn't a lot of description as to why it happened more this month as opposed to previous months. There wasn't a lot of explanation as to where the issue was coming from, except for a really brief discussion. It's fine. It's over now. But I'm glad they're working on it. But it was just I didn't love the statement being so limited in scope. But they're working on it. They're working on it. Also, Botticus, the largest multi-sport events are the Olympics. I didn't realize it, but the Asian Games is all kinds of stuff. It's apparently a 4-year annual competition that's been going on for almost 100 years now, and so Hearthstone will be featured as an esport alongside of physical sports and other esports, which is super cool.
That is cool. We'll have to definitely cover a bit of that after it happens, so that'll be exciting. There was a interview of Chou at HCT Summer Champs. I believe that's Che Space on Twitter, and it was a pretty interesting interview. They didn't really chop it up to be in text form. It feels like they typed it out all verbatim to what he said, so it gave me a better sense of how he kind of approached the interview and his thoughts on the different topics that were discussed. It seems like they have a lot that they want to work on for the next upcoming year. Everything's kind of set in stone, but it was good to get their perspective, or his perspective at least, on how they approach this year of HCT, and that they're seeing all of this feedback and how they're looking to improve on it. And it just gave me I don't know if hope is the right word, but it gave me kind of their perspective as to, yeah, they see everything that's going on, and they will probably be working on some good improvements for even next year. I'm excited to see what they come up with. Appa, did you get a chance to read this interview?
I did not, unfortunately.
What about you, Hat?
I was able to read a bit of it, and I think it's really interesting to kind of see the things that matter, and still the larger discussion that esports as a whole is unsolved. There's what's the best esports we've seen. League of Legends was kind of legitimized and institutionalized before everyone else. And Rob, you can probably speak more to this than anyone else in the show about how revelatory OWL is, but also how new it is, and how it's facing some issues of its very own, despite being, I think, by most definitions, quite successful, right?
I mean, I may not be the best person to ask in that sense, because I personally think that Overwatch League is doing a lot wrong in how they're approaching it, and also a lot of like how they're marketing it now versus what they're planning to do with it, if that makes sense. Like saying that they're a global Overwatch league representing like the entire world, and it's like a really crazy endeavor, and we're willing to do it, and blah 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 blah. But like the fact of the matter is, their entire first season's taking place with all of the players living in one location, and it's in the United States only. And then they're saying, well, we're going to expand to have more teams. It's like, guys, look, listen, even if you expand for 4 more teams, that means that if all 4 teams are outside of the continental US, we have 4 plus London and 1 in Korea and 1 in China. That's 7 total teams out of, let's see, we're at what, 12 now? So that's 16. So 7 out of 16 teams are outside of the US, and they've got to park it in LA and a global league. So, I mean, it kind of just depends on what you're trying to build and the infrastructure. It makes sense by what they are doing, but the way that they are approaching marketing it and pitching it is like, this is what you tell your investors what the plan is going to be, not what you tell the general community of what it is right now, because it's not that. And frankly, it's potentially successful, but it's coming under a lot of fire from a lot of other people because honestly, Blizzard Esports has not really been that big since StarCraft was big. Like esports and Blizzard don't really go hand in hand very often to be these entirely lucrative things until Hearthstone came back into the scene. So the fact that Hearthstone's scene is quote unquote lucrative is pretty interesting to me. I feel like the way that they're going to need to approach it is coming under a lot of fire from the professional scene, because what they're doing is not iterating on an existing system for the professional circuit. What they're doing is they are modifying it about every year to be something different, instead of like sticking to a system and iterating on that system and making what they have better and better and better. They're kind of like introducing new things that they have to adjust an existing system to become, and then find some form of middle ground. And it not only introduces a way to shore up all of the issues of the previous system, but also introduce a whole slew of new ones. And the main thing that I'm really trying to harp on is the team aspect. You guys saw how like teams can start earning money now, and how they're trying to like work with adjusting the points each year, but they're keeping the same format, you know, of like of how you play the game and how the bans are and like that. So they're sticking with that side and keeping some of the variables constant. But man, it's just got to be a nightmare on their end, to be honest. And I feel like players whose livelihoods are on the line and they're trying to do what they can, but it's like Blizzard's just constantly getting thrown under the bus for no reason, and the players aren't really even trying to get into their headspace very often. And I'm not speaking to every player, but I feel like the impatience and the emotion kind of take over because it is your livelihood, versus them. It's just like, well, we're going to have to try better the next time. It's like there's got to be a little bit more responsibility, I think, on their end to make sure that there are some fail safes. But I think that they're still trying to do their due diligence. And again, you have to understand that their leadership structure is going to be fundamentally shifting over the next year, because Brode decided that this is his time to go do something else. And the team was okay with that. And so they're trying to fundamentally shift internally in visionary areas, right, in direction.
Yeah, speaking of Blizzard getting thrown under the bus, JasonZhou actually made a tweet regarding China and its relationship with Hearthstone Esports. And here are a few different quotes actually from the translated tweet. It says that China is failing at HCT, and it's not completely the players' fault. Some of the Chinese fans say that the 4 Chinese players at HCT are bad. Jason believes that these players are already the best ones China has to offer. China's competitive scene has been dead for a long time. Even players like Jason, China's best performer at HCT, can't find tournaments to play in this year. Players and teams are now leaving the scene. Blizzard doesn't seem to be communicating with China at all. HCT doesn't include China in the first place, and Jason believes that Blizzard's actions are proving that they've already abandoned the Chinese scene from from Hearthstone. And Hat puts a little note in here that this is dumb.
That wasn't me.
And I want to know why.
Who said it was dumb? I'm not disagreeing, but that was me.
Okay. So why is what he What is your interpretation of what he's saying, Hat?
This, I don't know. I want to make sure that we're understanding and respectful of the things that a pro player is saying, and that we not immediately dismiss them out of hand. And I don't know how accessible tournaments are in China. I don't know how much. There's a third-party company called NetEase that is Blizzard's connection to how the game is run in China, along with the pricing, the store, the tournament support, etc. And I don't know if there's an in-between issue there. I know there was a pretty highly visible translation issue last year where the pros did not know it was best of 5 instead of best of 3, if I recall correctly, or it's a best of 7 instead of best of 5. That was it. I think it was HCT Winter last year. I know that there was some confusion there. But on the other hand, this feels a lot like what someone who doesn't win a tournament would say. And
this also feels like a hell of a lot of hyperbole coming from a personal opinion of a very disgruntled top player. And it should not be interpreted by anything different than somebody like 6-0 or Rage or Amnesiac raging on Twitter. I feel like that's probably what this should be interpreted.
Yeah, well,
as.
and the difference there, though, is that Zixo and Amnesiac in particular have both kind of changed their tone and how they relate with the game and social media. Obviously, this is translated and directly quoted by another party. The tone isn't going to come across quite right in text. But Zixo, this past week, had a whole issue getting registered for HCT Italy, and it turns out that he had to apologize, and he chose to apologize, because he had logged in on someone else's laptop and had forgotten to log out, and someone else submitted their decks under his name. And he owned that and apologized and said, I totally understand if nobody, if they don't let me play. And, you know, Amnesiac as well has really changed his tone on social media. I don't mean to make it about them. I definitely want to talk about what Jason is saying, but I have difficulty disagreeing with you that this sounds like it comes from a place of emotion. If there's lack of tournament support, I get it. If the only way you can practice grinding Legend Ladder, I get that that's not going to be a good replacement for tournament play. But there is a lively practice scene. I imagine that pros can play against each other, if nothing else. I don't know. It's players and teams leaving the scene happens everywhere and every day and all the time. I mean, Appa, you're pretty wired in. Go ahead, Rob.
No, Appa, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. So Appa,
I was just saying it's no different.
Appa, you are a tournament player, and you deal with this kind of team drama. I mean, not that your team has drama, but you have been experienced with interacting with multiple different teams, and you've seen teams come together, fall apart. What's your take on this?
I mean, the problem is that the esports industry is kind of set up. The teams and organizations kind of set themselves up behind other games like League of Legends or Dota or Counter-Strike and stuff like that. And they put players on salaries, and that's kind of not really feasible in Hearthstone, if that makes sense, because a player's worth is pretty much determined by their tournament results and ladder finishes and how many HCT points they get and stuff like that. But teams, depending on how their contracts are written, they make money off of players doing well at events. They'll send them there, they'll comp like all their stuff, but a lot of the times they'll take a cut of their winnings in order to like have them on salary and make money off of their results. But Hearthstone isn't a game completely like based on skill like Counter-Strike or League or Overwatch or those kinds of things. Like there is a lot of randomness in this game that makes being a consistent tournament finisher very, very difficult. Like the best players in the game aren't going to win every tournament they go to, or like even top 16 every tournament they go to. So if a team is funneling money into players and either they get unlucky at tournaments or they're not performing or whatever, there's a ton of variables. They're going to have to drop Hearthstone from their roster, because if they're paying players based on a salary and they're not getting anything from that, then they're just flushing money down the toilet, basically, from a business perspective. So teams leave all the time. And if what JasonZhou is saying is that there's not a lot of domestic tournaments in China, which, I mean, I guess that would make sense considering how like insulated the Chinese scene seems from like the rest of the world pretty much. If Blizzard is focusing on like the Americas and EU and APAC and like not China specifically because of like how NetEase runs stuff, then there's not going to be a lot of domestic tournaments, and then there's not going to be a lot of like opportunity for money for these organizations. So it makes sense that teams are leaving, but I don't think this is like a run for the hills, it's all over moment. This is just like Hearthstone, like the esports team. I'm sure they're addressing this, and I'm sure they're going to come up with a solution for it. But for right now, I'm sure for someone in China like JasonZhou, who plays at a very high level, I'm sure he's kind of panicked, for lack of a better word, because it seems like the sky is falling, but I don't think it is.
Plus, China is just a freaking massive country with a gigantic population, and people like saying that they lack a local tournament scene in America. Like, I bet you if they had a translated thing into Chinese, the Chinese people would just laugh at us. Like, yeah, you go try taking a 4-hour plane flight over a few mountain ranges and tell me how easy it is. Driving a couple hours being inconvenient. Just really funny to me.
Good luck. Good luck driving anywhere in China. I just got back from China a month and a half ago. Yeah, you don't get anywhere. There's too many people.
And I haven't seen the numbers in a while, but I remember an article that Eloise wrote in 2015 that she said China typically gets between 20 and 30,000 legend finishers a month. That was 2015. Under the old system, like no ranked floors, reset to rank 16 legend, almost 30,000 people. Let's see. December 2015, 38,000 legends. 38,000. I can't even fathom. Can't even fathom it.
I would just want to know how many of that is other people grinding multiple ladder legend finishes as well. So I feel like everybody and their mom that's in the competitive scene has got, their EU account, their Asia account.
Yeah, I don't know if there's some kind of internal country thing with NetEase, because I don't think that you can choose China as a drop-down server in the Hearthstone client. From what I remember, I don't remember seeing it. I remember seeing EU, Asia Pacific, and Americas.
Right.
So I don't know if there's something different there. Anyways, 38,000 is a lot of people. But in order to keep the show moving, I think that we can talk about the next article, which, unlike our previous sections, may cause us to have opinions. And please note, I could not be being more sarcastic right now.
So I'll bring up the title of the next article. It's called The Veteren Player Experience. And I will be honest, I did not get a chance to read this article in depth, but I know somebody who happens to be on the podcast that read it a lot more in depth than I did and has some very important opinions on it that changed my mind, because initially when I had seen this article, all I read was the bullet points they had here, and all of these seemed like potential things they could do. I'll just go over them real quickly. The major bullet points were portraits, ranked borders, hero portrait borders, titles, game board customization, custom emotes, more rewards for ranked wins, achievement system, monthly challenges, heroic PvE, or incentive to reach legend more than once, as all possible things they could do to improve the veteran player experience. But I know Rob had some opinions on this article that that was there even before this section of the article. So Rob, why don't you kind of say what your opinion was on this?
Okay, so before I go on to a little tangent here, I want to be very clear that number one, people writing extensive articles like this make me very happy. Regardless if their opinions are completely off base or 100% accurate or somewhere in the middle, I really appreciate people spending the amount of time that this person, let's see if I can find their tag. It is
Stonekeep
HS. And also a person in the community sparked his idea into a question on Twitter to help him write the article. So thank you so much for putting that time and effort into writing the article. But in as much effort that you spent into your opinion in articulating the opinion in the first place, I have equal rights to have my own opinion about how much I disagree with it.
Oh, man.
So, the second half of this article as well, part of the groundwork is that everything Botticus listed is at a very surface level, not a terrible idea, and also not something that I would personally think is a great carrot on a stick in and of itself either. So what I mean by that is the article is broken into two main sections. Are veteran players important at the beginning, and new kinds of cosmetic rewards in the end. And we did a very big broad brushstroke over the top, like Botticus mentioned. That being said, when you look at the things under the first primary section of are veteran players important, I cannot fundamentally disagree more. And let me give you a point where, again, this is going to be out of context, so please go and read the article. If you are in the chat or you are listening to the show right now, I highly recommend going to the show notes and link and find this link and read the article and then come back. It's a very good read, even if you just read the first section. But I will read 1 or 2 paragraphs that will help you. So why don't they do it? Which basically means why don't they help veteran players do some of these reasons about being in the minority and catering certain things about loyalty to the veteran players? It's kind of why don't they help them? The only explanation I found so far is the one I've posted above. They don't want to do something that can't be obtained by less than 10% of players. However, that's just a silly design philosophy. It is like deliberately punishing players for being good or for playing the game for a long time, and it should be the opposite. Maybe they should also remove the legendary card back, since they can't be obtained by most players. I don't see any players who can get into Legend being salty about not having that card back. On the contrary, for a lot of players, it was an incentive to try harder to finally hit Legend for the first time, in quotations or in parenthesis, and usually the only time. I know a lot of players who pushed hard to Legend for the first card back and then didn't care because there was no reason to do it again anymore. Since we've already established that it wouldn't hurt anyone if a veteran player's got more goals to work towards, let's take a closer look at what these goals might be and the rewards the veteran players could be getting. And I'll repeat it to make sure everything else is clear. In bold, these things should not come at the cost of new player experience, which is still far from perfect, in the rewards of veteran players, which Botticus referenced, are more in depth than just the broad brushstrokes. But my goodness, there are so many assumptions here that I feel like for me to tell you I disagree is I don't know. The entire paragraph is just fundamentally tilting me to my core. To give you an idea, everything that is said here is built on a basis of wet sandpaper of how you're supposed to stand on any form of solidity. There's nothing here. They're all assumptions made and logical fallacies.
Can you stand on dry sandpaper?
Not that there's nothing under it. I don't know. I don't know what else to say. I'm just fundamentally tilted that not even my analogies make sense anymore. So,
okay.
Gosh, dang, dude. I can't. I just want to put my headset down and face palm for the rest of eternity after reading that.
Okay, so let's digest. Let's digest from our balanced perspective here. What about this seems to be off? And again, I agree with Rob. The effort of writing this kind of article, it should not be understated, should not be underappreciated. And I do think that Blizzard, their bigger problem is how do we get people and transition them from a new player to a veteran player. That's by far the bigger problem. We all know that absorption of a new player, someone newer to the game, is difficult because of how much external knowledge there is to the game that seems to be necessary to make any kind of decent climb, which is why the strength of our community matters so much, but also why the in-game tools to connect a player from brand new to ladder in any way are kind of missing. Just not really there. There's not really an effective transition gap. Deck recipes are all we really have. But with that being said, assumption that Blizzard is specifically excluding anything that would cater to veteran players is immediately disproven when you say that heroic tavern brawls existed more than once. And I get that they give people a free entry, but they give you this crazy shiny reward and advertise the reward super clearly, and almost everybody doesn't get it. Almost everybody. Say that 95%, if not higher, of heroic tavern brawls are somewhere between dead money and maybe 8 or 9 wins, but 12 is extraordinarily difficult, and most players never get there, and it's something that Blizzard has done multiple times, and it's been extremely popular. So, I don't know if we can base the Blizzard's design philosophy on that assumption, and if we can't use that assumption, a lot of the reasoning in this article just kind of doesn't hold up as much. I understand the devil's advocate argument of remove the legendary card back because most people can't get it, but again, that's based on the assumption that is making Rod walk around the room and just yell at himself with all that internal conflict.
To be sure, that was hyperbole of him talking about the legendary card back. Like, it's very obvious that he's using that as a satirical evidence for not catering rewards to 10% of the player if less than 10% of players can't achieve it.
Yeah, it's clear hyperbole used as a linguistic device.
Terrible
Fine.
example.
Well, it's Rob. It's gonna be okay, buddy. It's gonna be okay. You have your card back. You played Secret Paladin.
No,
it's gonna be okay.
Can't do it.
It's just stay with me, buddy. We're almost halfway through the show, maybe. But so I don't. Anyone who else has strong opinions? Who else has opinions? Appa, do you have opinions?
Nope.
Botticus, do you have opinions?
Well, here,
Not really.
Let me wrap it up if Botticus doesn't have anything here.
I'll just say
I'll
that
bring us home.
I'll just say that I think that there's lots of potential in the things, in the suggestions he has, at least the topics. There's definitely potential, but I definitely agree with Rob in that maybe the way parts of this were worded do not lead me to believe that he has necessarily the best intentions in mind with stuff like this. It definitely feels like he's a bit off base with some of the things that he's assuming.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because I feel like all of the suggestions here definitely scratch that urge of a carrot on the stick that people are willing to chase, even if I'm not one of them. And even if I'm not one of any of these groups, and those are not rewards that I would even want to chase as a player, I feel like there are still a massive 40 million people out there with accounts in Hearthstone that there's a good chunk of at least 1 million of them that would be willing to do that and want to do that as a carrot that they're looking to do. That being said, I feel like let's just ignore the fact that this is an assumption that Blizzard's design philosophy is that they were not going to make something that less than 10% of the players can do, because they very clearly have a legendary card back that you can go and get and rewards for hitting each tier of rank at the end of the season, even if they're meaningless. In your own mind, those are carrots that you can chase as a quote unquote veteran player. Okay. They are in the system. They're there. They are carrots you can chase. The issue then is not this, but rather, is it enough? That's the real fundamental question we should be getting at, is like, is there enough in Hearthstone for you to chase? And the question isn't really up to Blizzard to decide. It's up to the player bases to decide if this is a game that they're willing to play extensively for these carrots. And when can you get them? I feel like that's the one thing that I really walked away from the article that was really absent. A lot of it is like assuming the same pacing that we have, whether we have a long-term goal of 500 wins or we have like a monthly goal of like hitting legend or hitting a ranked season reward, right? And so if any player has access to some form of progression, we talked a little bit about this, I think, on Hearthstone, on both my show last week and on Omnic Lab, where you have to realize that anytime you put a reward in a game, there is either, it's in like one of 3 categories. Either you do something and you get something, right? Do something, get this. That's the most base sense of a reward structure, right? That's like your daily quest. That's your tavern brawl. That's very simple turnaround time, right? And even arena, you could even venture to say that that's a pretty quick turnaround time, right? But then you have stuff that's like progression versus competition. You have a competition goal of hitting legend, hitting an end of season reward. That is a competition based section of play versus a progression sense, which is how 500 wins with a class, or getting 1,000 wins in arena, or something like that. That is a progression centralized goal. And in Overwatch, they have something like this where if you get so many competitive points, you can spend them and you can get a golden gun to shoot people with that's shiny. Okay, that's a progression sense. But the problem is a lot of the player base in every single game that exists currently, people want progression in something that is competition that is balanced. And so people get frustrated when they get stuck at rank 12 or stuck when they get rank 5, or they can't rank up in certain areas because I've played this game long enough. It should have rewarded me with my progression. Hearthstone isn't a progression game when you're playing ranked anymore. It's a competitive system that you're working on rewards based off of competition, and time investment is a part of progressing in getting better, but it's not necessarily progressing as by virtue of making your rank higher, if that makes sense. And so I think if they're going to give us ranks to achieve or things to go chase after in Hearthstone, we need to understand as both a community and as a design company in Blizzard's Team 5 where these things fit and how much overlap there are between the two.
Yeah, that makes sense that we're really looking at the difference between cosmetic and competitive, and also at the issue that you're describing, Rob, is just kind of the lack of understanding that a player may have about where their roadblocks are as a player and how they're seeking competitive rewards with non-competitive behavior. And so if there's confusion there, or if the sense of progression, which we'll talk about pretty significantly later in the show, is not feeling achievable, then that's really what turns players off from the game. It's not getting anywhere. It's not having anything to do. It's not having anywhere to go. And I think that's a really fundamental difference. We have a good amount of time to talk about that later in the show, but we also have a pretty big tournament to talk about. And if you
we have another great topic that you're trying to skip over, Hat, and don't think that I don't see right through what you're trying to do, because there's one last article here that's called Mossy Horror, a hidden Metabreaker, and it's all about the glorious Mossy Horror. You heard his attack or his entrance animation at the start of the show, and it was beautiful. And he's a card you can definitely include in Miracle Rogue, and I think it's solid against specific decks. If you're seeing a lot of Taunt Warrior, if you're seeing a lot of Odd Paladin, Shutterwalk Shaman, decks like this, I think it's a great inclusion. We've seen some people hit rank 1 with it in their deck. We've seen people start including it in other decks like Shutterwalk Shaman, where you're not really relying on your totems that much. So you're even not toteming in a lot of cases, so it doesn't hurt you as much there. It's just overall a fairly solid card, and I'm really glad that I brought it up last week, and hopefully you can find the right metagame for it. I don't know that this is the right one, because Zoolock is starting to be a thing now, and there's a bit of even Warlock and some decks with slightly bigger minions, but it does have a place, I think, in if you're seeing the right decks out there. So try out Mossy Horror in Miracle Rogue, in Shutterwalk Shaman, if you're seeing the right decks.
Yep, I watched Asmo play it when he was making a top 100 climb a couple days ago, and he used it to kill 6 Spreading Plague Scarabs, and I said, you know what? I kind of get it. Kind of see where that has value. Because it was basically 6 mana double Pyroblast you, and that seemed pretty good. So anyways, now that we're 90 minutes into the show, let's talk about the Summer Championship that happened this past weekend.
It's the grand tournament.
Oh yeah, we make the competitive side of the game more accessible to you, so let's talk about the HCT Championships and my man Bunny Hopper. I just want to point out I'm 2 for 2 on picking the winner of HCT Championships, so thank you, Pax. I really appreciate you coming into my account, hopefully having nice golden cards in them. A golden Blood Mage Thalnos would be really nice. Anyways, Bunny Hopper took the championship over A83650, who will herefore be called A Numbers. Took the finals over A Numbers, and then the top 4, Killing All Day, the year of Killing All Day, ended in October. Unfortunately, didn't make it all the way through. And Viper, who prepared with Bunny Hopper, had an identical lineup, were 3rd and 4th. Chou, Jinsu, Nalgadon, and Turna filled out the top 8. It was a really great tournament to watch because I'll tell you, we had some really, really interesting matches that played out here. We'll talk about quite a few of them, but also just some really interesting game plans and lineups. This meta is super diverse, completely unsolved, still to this day. We have an idea of what decks are going to be good, but it changes from tournament to tournament. So we know we're going to see even Warlock. There are 11 out of the 14 Warlocks there, and only 3 cubes. Zoo had not made an appearance yet. Druid was still predominantly Taunt Druid, 9 taunts, 3 tokens, 1 Spiteful. On the ladder right now, that makeup is very, very different. There's a lot more Malygos Druid on the ladder, and the occasional Togwaggle Druid. And there's a lot of big Druids now. So this still is kind of an artifact of about a week or two ago. A lot of Taunt Druids there that haven't really translated as much to the ladder. And 3 tokens, 1 Spiteful. 8 Shutterwalk Shamans, that's still around a bit. And 3 Even Shamans. The 9 Miracle Rogues, and that's definitely, we're seeing less of that on the ladder, but they're still around. There were 5 big Spell Mages, those were the only mages we saw. 4 Priests, 3 were Mind Blast Priests, which is definitely outdated at this point. And a combo Dragon Priest. There were 4 Katharina Hunters, 3 Odd Paladins, and a Taunt Warrior. And those are all kind of hovering around their same spot in the meta. As we discussed, this was definitely the tournament of the Void Ripper, and that card has really started to crop up on the ladder in a really major way. We even saw it in Chou T's Spiteful Druid. Now, the winning lineup was Bunny Hoppers, Big Spell Mage, Miracle Rogue, Shutterwalk, and even Warlock. So, really interesting, slower lineup. Definitely meant to contain the... Well, it does a little bit of everything. I mean, Appa, you look at this lineup. Big Spell, Miracle Rogue, Shutterwalk, even Warlock. What do you think he was targeting with this? What do you think he was trying to ban?
Viper and Bunny Hopper built this lineup to absolutely slam Taunt Druid. Big Spell Mage is really good against Taunt Druid once you draw your Skulking Geist, because they have no way to actually pop their own Hadronox on their own turn, because the Spellstones don't get high enough. Or, well, I mean, those are gone with Geist anyways. But you just have to play the Hadronox on 9 or pull it from Master Oakheart, and then this Mage can sheep it. So if you mulligan really hard for Geist and hit Geist by 6, or by the time they're planning on Hadronoxing, that matchup's usually fine. Miracle Rogue is fairly solid against Taunt Druid. The Shutterwalk Shaman is fine against Taunt Druid. It's not fantastic.
It's
because,
a lot better with Black Knight.
Yeah, they have Black Knight in here. Sometimes the Taunt Druid can get off to like a really explosive start with Wild Growth and Nourish and that kind of stuff, but in most of the games it seemed like the Shutterwalk Shaman was able to contain the Taunt Druid at least a reasonable amount. But
well, and Hex is pretty good.
Yeah, Hex is really good against them. The trick is to make your volcanoes as impactful as possible, and the Taunt Druid kind of gets in the way of that because a lot of its minions have really fat butt. And their even Warlock list was even teched to beat Taunt Druid. It had a copy of Skulking Geist in there, so they could Skulking Geist away the Naturalizes and the Spellstones, silence the first Hadronox that comes down with Spellbreaker, maybe even silence the second one. And then it had a copy of Black Knight as well. So they were definitely trying to prey on Taunt Druid. And, I mean, their bans kind of fluctuated. I know against Kill 'Em All Day, I'm pretty sure... Did he ban Token Druid, or did he leave it up? I can't remember.
I think he banned... I feel like he banned Rogue, but I don't know if that's true.
Yeah, that would be a smart ban from them, because their lineup is fairly soft to Rogue. But I mean, it's a pretty flexible lineup, and you can change the bans depending on what your opponents bring. But in general, they realized that Taunt Druid was really powerful, and they wanted to target that as best as they could and not bring it themselves, because they figured if they came to the conclusion that targeting it is really good, then other people might have as well. So they didn't want to expose themselves to having poor matchups because they brought it.
Can you talk about how crazy it is that Ancestral Healing, Bog Shaper, and Black Knight all as a trifecta in this deck are just ridiculous on top of having a Wild Pyromancer? My goodness. Was this Bunny Hopper's list, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Bunny Hopper and Viper played identical lists, and it definitely had strange card choices. Double Pyro over Keleseth. Included the Murmuring Elemental because you want to make sure you're going off when you're playing for so much money. And the Bog Shaper and Ancestral Healing is just some spice. You just want to make sure you churn through the deck as quickly as possible. And in my experience playing Shutterwalk, Hemet is not very good. And Black Knight is just generally good because there are a lot of Lich Kings out there. So being able to play Bog Shaper and churn through the deck and be a pseudo Gadgetzan Auctioneer was really powerful for them. But you don't want to play Hemet and either get rid of your Zola or just be playing a card that's really clunky to play in a lot of matchups and against a lot of decks. So it was really fun to
Bog
see it.
Shaper Ancestral seemed really crazy to me. I was just like, so wait, you can play a 4/8 with Taunt and draw a card for 7 mana.
You also get
That's
to
what
kill.
Ancestral Healing does.
You get to kill any minion on demand with Ancestral Healing and Black Knight.
Oh
which-
yeah, he did that
Right.
one game and it was
He
ridiculous.
did that, and the casters were like, it's like an episode of Home Improvement from casters, man. It was crazy.
Yeah, it was a Mountain Giant hidden behind a Void Lord, which you're never going to get to unless you have exactly
You have
that
those
combo.
cards.
The Black Knight always triumphs.
Yep, the Ancestral Healing giveth and the Black Knight taketh away. So there's a lot of interesting stuff going on in this tournament. You can kind of tell that these aren't your typical ladder decks, and please don't bring these on ladder as is. You will have some trouble. But those Wild Pyros are clearly included because Bunny Hopper was probably going to leave up Odd Paladin most of the time if he had better bans like Rogue, and only has one Lightning Storm. So if you want to deal with a board of 1/1 tokens, can't really do that with only one Lightning Storm unless you include those Pyros, which for me have been generally underwhelming on the ladder. And Viper had the same lineup. Now, A numbers in the finals, he had a very different lineup. He had Taunt Druid, Mind Blast Priest, Miracle Rogue, and Q Block. This is definitely more of an anti-Warlock lineup if I've ever seen one. This lineup right here is just trying to prey on Warlock. The Q Block has that inevitability. The Miracle Rogue, if you've never been the even Warlock in that matchup, I wouldn't recommend it. It doesn't feel great. And Mind Blast Priest is really able to stabilize and do that big amount of burst damage in the middle of the game, and Taunt Druid just runs both Warlocks out of resources. So it's unsurprising that he left Warlock up and preyed on it, and I imagine that he banned Rogue almost every round. Meanwhile, Killing All Day. It was the year of Killing All Day, and he had the level 1 lineup of ban Warlock and play aggro decks, Token Druid, Odd Paladin, Even Shaman, and Even Warlock. But as you can probably tell, a lot of players had lineups that had anti-aggro strategies that were beyond Defile. So it's almost got there for him. And Killing All Day, all 4 of these players played really well, even though there were a couple of games that we will talk about where there may be some decisions that didn't quite make sense. But it was a really fun tournament to watch, and all the players that landed in the top 4, you could really tell that they had practiced and honed these lineups with very specific targets. Now, we have some games, and we're not just going to watch them, we're going to discuss them. I've got a couple games that I want to talk about that were just fun to watch, and then Appa had some opinions about the Hearthstones, and we'll get into those too. The first game we're going to discuss, Killing All Day versus Jinsu, Game 2. Jinsu was on Miracle, and Killing All Day was on Even Warlock. Now, if you haven't played this matchup, it is probably about 2/3 favored for the Miracle Rogue, if not more. If they ever get Sap or Coin Vilespine with a threat on board, it feels almost impossible to win as the Even Warlock. It's really, really bad. And the game plan is get in the board fast and stay there, like, really fast. 2 drops, coin out 4 drops if you can, and just keep playing stuff as early and quickly as possible to try and contest Miracle Rogue's development. So Killing All Day starts off Doomsayer on 2 into Coin Twilight Drake on 3. Even though he has a Mountain Giant in hand, you know what? Give it a minute. Don't need to play the Mountain Giant right away. I need to get something on the board now on the clear board that I have, because he played that Doomsayer on 2, so no Hench Clan Thug was coming on 3. So he gets the Twilight Drake Sept, plays it again, and Jinsu, bless his heart, he does the smart rogue thing of, well, I played Thalnos and Sap last turn, this Thalnos can carry a Cold Blood just fine, 5 you. Hit him in the face, but it's not fast enough. Killing All Day really aggressively develops and controls the board and just plays stuff and plays stuff and plays stuff. So there's lots of swings that come back and forth. There's a Shroom Brewer that comes down. Jinsu responds by making a 12-12 Edwin, but then the board gets immediately wiped because the Mountain Giant charged in. We get Tainted Zealot Defile, which kills 4 minions, including the Edwin. Kilnalday looks like he might actually make it, and he drops double hooked Reaver. Then Gadgetzan goes Spider. Spider number 2. Spider number 3, out of nowhere. So the Gadget gets traded, but all of a sudden there's 12 free power out of nowhere, and Gul'dan only makes a little 4-4 and a little 2-4 with taunt. Skulking Geist comes down. That last Cold Blood gets yanked out of Jinsu's deck. And the Miracle is still putting pressure on, still drawing cards with that sprint, still trying to fill up the board, but the Gul'dan hero power continues to help Kilnalday stabilize. And Jinsu hasn't found Leroy yet. He's 25 cards in the deck. 26, 27, 28. Leroy is the last card in the deck. So all that Jinsu can do is sprint with 2 cards left in library, a Leroy and a Spider. Kilnalday's at 8 life. The Spider comes down. Dagger hits, brings him down to 7. Kilnalday has 1 hero power activation to put himself to 10. Top decks the Spellstone. Puts himself to 14. Jinsu's in fatigue, only has Leroy left and concedes. Holy crap. What a game. 25-minute Miracle Rogue Even Warlock matchup. That was just one of the games we're going to talk about. This tournament was great. You should have watched it if you didn't watch it, but it's okay, we're here for you. And we also had A8 versus Chou. This was game 2 as well. Recruit Hunter versus Taunt Druid. It's a slow matchup. Takes a while to get going, though A numbers does go Wild Growth into Coin Nourish. And there's a fast Lich King, but it gets answered, and then Dragon Hatcher comes down on turn 6, but then Oozling rushes, and then Lich King comes out and rushes again, and when you attack for 13 out of nowhere, that's pretty good. And A numbers is holding on Oakheart. The only card left in the deck for it to pull is Hadronox. There just aren't enough taunts yet. So Chou starts to run out of gas. He starts trading, and A numbers is down to only 8 life. He gets himself a Hadronox and gets 4 taunts, including a Troglu meter. If you don't know what that is, I don't blame you. It's the 5-mana 1/5 taunt with Poisonous. And that's really, really powerful against deck with Kathrinas and Witchwood Grizzlies and Charged Devilsaurs. So Chou starts pulling out more beasts from his deck, and he uses Rexar to tidy up the board a bit. A numbers is a super awkward hand, so he cubes a Sleepy Dragon and then cubes it again, spits out 2 Sleepy Dragons. Poisonous Life Drinker starts coming down, King Crush starts hitting in, but then Primordial Drake clears back, and a rushing Bloat Bat comes down for Chou and clears the board again. And then Hadronox, Clutch Top Deck gets the Naturalize. And finally, Chou keeps 4 minions on the board and manages to win with a swipe from the top of the deck. It was a crazy game. Again, took about 20-ish minutes. It's important to note that on turn 4, Chou had 4 mana and the coin, and Houndmaster Shah, and goes coin Houndmaster Shah, and looks at the screen for a second and waits and puts his head in his hands. And we don't know exactly what happened, if it was a misclick on the coin, if he thought it was turn 3, but the difference here is that on turn 4, Chou played Houndmaster Shah, coin, Firefly into an empty board, when in reality he just wanted to play Houndmaster Shah, go, and the following turn, the Lich King would have been met by coin, rushing, Seeping Oozling into Lich King of my own, with Candle Shot, Firefly, and Hunter's Mark up. It would have been kill your stuff and I get a Lich King. And instead it was I spend 2 cards and don't get my own Lich King. And it was the difference between winning and losing. So the casters kind of freaked out at what is going on here. What is the point of playing that Firefly here? And we don't know what exactly happened. We do know that Chou visibly reacted and lost the game because of it. And yet there's more. But I want to talk about, well, we've got someone special in our cast. Well, we've got 4 special players in our cast. Or at least 3 in me. But Hearthstone Professional Team Crescent member, Appa HS, has some dope analysis of a really amazing match between Nalgudan and Viper. And you can't see this or hear this, but everyone is laughing at me describing Appa that way. I don't know why they're laughing at your achievements, Appa. I think you're special. You can talk. You can say stuff.
Oh my gosh. Hat's just like memeing me. I feel like these are just like, I don't know. It's a good meme though.
Would I ever meme you, Appa?
The games I wanted to talk about were both from Nalgudan versus Viper series. And I believe this was the top 8 match to determine who goes to Worlds. And I think, did you want to say some stuff before I started for game 2?
Yeah, well, let's give some background into the turn you're going to talk about, because you're really focusing on about 1 turn worth of decisions that actually should decide the whole game. Really, when we start off this game, it's Recruit Hunter versus Shutterwalk, right? Again, 2 slow decks. It's a back-and-forth trade. Takes a while to develop. I mean, when you're talking about Fireflies versus Wild Pyromancer and Acolyte of Pain versus Stitch Tracker. These are not the aggro decks. These are not the curve decks. And the real pivotal turns before we get to the vital turn 10, Nalgudan gets down a Houndmaster Shah that is uncontested, and that again leads into Coin Oozling that sends in the 5-4, and then he gets a 7-7 that has Rush and Charge. Volcano swings back, Lich King comes down, it gets Black Knighted from Viper because Black Knight is everywhere, and then we go into Nalgudan's turn 10 on the Hunter side, and Appa sees something that doesn't smell right.
So, yeah, like Hat said, the important decision in this game, I think, was when turn 10 rolls around. And so some important background info to know is Viper has 4 cards in hand. What he has in his hand doesn't matter from Nalgudan's perspective because he doesn't know, but he's already used a Hex, a Volcano, and a Glacial Shard, which are the cards that can punish big minions. And Nalgudan has a Deathstalker Rexar active, but he draws a King Crush for his turn. And Nalgudan also has a Katharina on board with 3 health remaining, so it's a 6-3, and Viper is at 35 because he's played Hagatha and he's at full health. So what Nalgudan should do here is just slam King Crush down and hit Viper for 17. This drops Viper to 23 and forces a removal spell, but he doesn't do this. What he does instead is he tunnel visions into the press your hero power every turn mindset because it draws you a big fat minion every turn with every beast you craft, and usually that's really good. But it was much better here for Nalgudan to take a proactive approach because Viper's on the back foot. He has very few resources right now. He's already used some of his premium removal spells against big minions. Chances are he only has 1 or none in his hand. And this also uses your mana most effectively. And because Nalgudan doesn't just slam this King Crush and get in there, it rots in his hand for, I think, 5 or 6 turns. And he just misses out on potential lethal with King Crush if Viper doesn't have the answer. If he just plays the King Crush and hits, he's pretty much asking Viper the question, do you have it? If not, you lose. If you do, this game continues and I still win because I just slam this hero power every turn to make a beast. But instead, he decides to go for card advantage over tempo, and I think that's completely wrong in this situation because Viper's going to win the game once he reaches a certain point. Nalgudan cannot grind him out past when Shudderwalk is drawn. The game is just going to end, and he's gonna lose. So Nalgudan should be forcing the issue more than he does here. And to be fair, I guess, but I think this is results-oriented thinking, Nalgudan does win this game eventually, but he would have won it much quicker if he just played the King Crush whenever he drew it. Because he didn't, he locked himself basically into this line of building a beast every turn, and he just never had the opportunity to play King Crush after that. He was going to lose a turn, like quote-unquote lose a turn anyways, to play King Crush, because you can't do that plus hero power, because King Crush is 9 mana. So it's better to just do it as soon as possible, force Viper to have an answer, and then refill afterwards. And I made a tweet when this game was going on that Hat liked, that basically said this is a prime example of when doing something right, quote-unquote right, is wrong. Like, because as Hearthstone players, we're kind of ingrained to hit the hero power before making a decision, or hit the hero power and draw a card, and assess the scenario that's going on to make a decision first. But in this case, I firmly believe that playing a 9/9 with charge and hitting for 17 is, in order to spend the most amount of mana that turn, is better than crafting a beast. To be fair, though, Nalgudan did have an anti-magic shell from the Lich King, but that's just something you could deploy afterwards. Yeah, so that's kind of my take on this scenario. Is there anything you wanted to add?
I wanted to add something real quick, just that generally this happens a lot more with better players where they get tunnel visioned into, they know the matchup so well and know how they win it. So he knows as the hunter player that he's just going to press that button every turn, and you make these really awkward minions for the shaman to remove and win the game out that way. But I totally agree with you that a lot of times that's how you miss lethal, is you get into this mindset of this is what I have to do, this is how I generally win the game. Whereas just playing King Crush, on average, the card that you create with Build a Beast is not going to be as good as just playing the King Crush. So he should have just done that. And
so I can use that excuse the next time I miss lethal on my stream, that I'm such a good player that's why I didn't see it. Thank you, Botticus.
I'm just saying that happens to me every once in a while, where I have lethal and I look at their board for a long time thinking what the best way to remove it all is, and then realize, oh, I could have just killed them. That would have been easier.
It was actually kind of funny that you say that, Botticus, that the average minion you're gonna get is not gonna be as good as King Crush. I think Nalgidon high rolled as hard as physically possible on his Build-A-Beast, in that he got a charging Vicious Fledgling that he was able to pair with Anti-Magic Shell and Katharina, and it still wasn't as good as playing King Crush. Because the board got volcanoed, and then he still had this King Crush in his hand. He just didn't play it for like 4 more turns.
Well, and the casters were talking, they were saying all Viper has to do is draw Shutterwalk. That's all he had to do, and it was in the bottom 10 cards of his deck. It might have even been lower. And all you're doing by beast tapping there is just giving him more time to draw Shutterwalk. And so I get the play. I'm not gonna put myself in the position of being, top 8 of the hardest Hearthstone tournament there is, because I would never have made it there. And there obviously was some kind of decision making that went into this, but at some point you just got to kill that shaman right in the face. That's just what you got to do. That's what their face is for, and it's what your King Crush is for. Just make them meet in the middle. But the game ends in Nalgidon's favor. The hunter does win. And then we play the Shutterwalk mirror that I don't know if I really have words to describe it, but I was messaging Appa while we were writing the show notes, and we were just like, what's with this game? I mean, the words we used were maybe a little bit less family friendly, but
it was so funny because Cora did the interview with the players after their sets and stuff, and after this spoiler alert, I guess, but Viper wins the match, and he's doing the interview with Cora, and Cora's like, what was with that Shutterwalk game? And he just puts his head in his hands, and he's just like, I don't want to talk about it. So what happens is that in Game 3, they queue up into a Shutterwalk Shaman mirror, and Viper has the same list that Bunny Hopper has that we talked about a little earlier, where he has the Murmuring Elemental, which when you play Murmuring Elemental and you grumble and you return it to your hand, it costs 1. So it allows you to guarantee your Shutterwalk repeats itself and returns itself to its hand. And so all he really has to do is wait for this Murmuring Elemental to come out of his deck, because he has all the other pieces. He's played Life Drinker, he's played Serenite Chain Gang. All he has to do is wait for Murmuring Elemental. But this is a case where somebody is so good and they've thought about so many possible lines that they have tricked themselves out of the best line of play moving forward. And Viper is thinking for so long, and he kind of convinces himself that Nalgidon is going to combo Viper out before he gets a chance to draw Murmuring Elemental. So he just runs the Shutterwalk out there. And because he didn't wait for Murmuring Elemental, when Grumble triggered first on this chain, it fizzled his combo. So Grumble triggered first, and then Life Drinker, and then Chain Gang. So he just had 2 stupid Shutterwalks sitting on the board, and none in his hand, which Nalgidon took advantage of, and he played a Murmuring Elemental plus a Hagathon on his turn, which was a full clear. And so this seems like the game's just over, right? Like, one of the Shutterwalk players has no more Shutterwalks. It can't walk anymore. Nalgidon still has his walk that he can draw, and he does, but because he played his Murmuring Elemental earlier to Hagatha clear, he can't play Murmuring Elemental to guarantee the combo. So he plays his Shudderwalk, and his Grumble triggers first. So he doesn't get any back in his hand either. So yeah, exactly. Viper is able to kill his Shudderwalks, and then the game just stalemates into this Hagatha back and forth value fest that I've never seen in my life.
It was the Totem Shaman mirror, except the only reason it's Totem Shaman is because you can't hit your hero power. I don't know. It's like Spell Zoo. It's like a Spell Zoo.
It was
like two kindergartners hitting each other with pool noodles for 20 minutes.
Yeah,
That's
it was
pretty accurate.
on nonsense. And Nalgidon manages to eat that out through some spell value and through a little bit better minion value. But yeah, these two games are definitely games to watch. The game 2 with Recruit Hunter versus Shudderwalk was interesting, and I think the King Crush turn, like the decision to not play it, was definitely a good talking point, and I think a learning scenario. And then I think game 3 is just a meme. The Shudderwalk mirror is just a big meme. So you should go watch it. It's really funny.
It really sucks playing the Shudderwalk Shaman mirror when your opponent plays Hemet and you don't, unless they fizzle and you fizzle because they destroyed all the cards in their deck.
Yes, you
And then it's
discovered the secret sub-strategy of if both of our decks suck, at least mine has more cards in it.
Yeah, I'm speaking from experience because exactly that happened to me this weekend.
Were you the Hemeter or the Hemetee?
No, I was the one who did not have a Hemet to be able to play because I was playing on Asia, and they lost, and it was great.
Yes, you figured out the Fatigue Shudderwalk Shaman matchup. Yeah.
Mo Hemet, mo problems.
Exactly right, Rob. So that's the name of the episode. We're going to write that down. And
You're welcome. I'm surprised it wasn't kindergartners with pool noodles for the episode title, but yeah,
you give us way too much material, but I can't say no to a soundbite like that. And I do want to point out, poor Nalgidon, he was playing against Shudderwalk Shaman again as Taunt Druid, and against Big Spell Mage, and the 30th card of his deck was a second Witching Hour, and he was hitting Fatigue, and he just goes Witching Hour, and Saddle just goes bah, because it was a sheep. And at the end of the series, Nalgidon, who lost, he just closed Hearthstone. He did not concede. The waiting for reconnect dialog box popped up. Can you really blame him? I sure can't. Hearthstone's a tough game sometime.
Well, in game 5, I also tweeted about this game because it was the most anticlimactic, sad thing to watch I think I've ever seen in Hearthstone Esports. Because Nalgidon pretty much full mulligans, and he just doesn't hit Wild Growth or Nourish or anything. And I think his first play is on turn 8 against Even Warlock. I think his first play is like a Primordial Drake or something. So he just gets run over. It's not even close. It's hard to watch. So Nalgidon just like Alt F4s the client whenever he loses. He just gets up and he's like, man, this sucks.
It happens. Hearthstone happens. But yeah, really amazing week of Tournament Hearthstone. And this upcoming week, we have the start of the next season. They are wasting no time. It is the HCT Italy. Start time is 11 a.m. Central European Time, which is 2 hours ahead of UTC. I believe that time is 6 hours ahead of U.S. Eastern Time at the moment, which makes 5 a.m. start. Text me if you're awake on Discord, and then we can watch some games together before I go to bed. Hi, Rob. I see you. And...
I'll be awake.
Yes. UK casting team, it'll be awesome. Jackie Chan's actually doing some casting. And HCT Oakland is the weekend after that. So we have a shorter explanations, which I'm sure you're all celebrating here. But we still want to talk about the deck of the moment. And our special guest is going to help us lead that discussion.
All right, friends and family, Hearthstone pillows and Pachimaris, cuddle up by the fire. Let's go, and we're gonna go fast. Okay. So this week, the explanations is Zoo Warlock. No, you didn't mishear me. Zoo and Warlock in the same sentence in 2018 before the second expansion of the year. Zoo Warlock is back, and we have Canadian player Ginky with a G messing with a list that he found, or maybe, I'm not going to put it past him if he happened to work with Rivius in Korea, who made a new build on an old friend of Zoo by using what they're calling or referring to as the recovery package, or recovery Zoo. So this list revolves around the exact identical list from 1 mana to 2 mana, which extends to all of the 1-drops and a HCT. So they're running Kobold Librarians and Flame Imps paired with Void Walkers. But the recovery package is what? Is probably what you're wondering. Well, you're running Soulfires, because recovery's best sense of recovery is killing your opponent, and the other is Light Wardens and Voodoo Doctors. Then on 3, the package extends to a Fungal Enchanter and double Happy Ghouls, and a Life Drinker to round them out. That is the recovery package that is eccentric within both lists. However, as with most people in APAC, China, and Korea, all of the players love tech cards. So with Ginky's list, you're going to be seeing 2 Life Drinkers and 2 Fungal Enchanters, which are these strange, how would I say this? Spore-capped veterans of healing. I don't know. Those guys with mushrooms on their heads, and they heal your allies at 3 mana for a 3/3. Pretty consistent vanilla minion, but the recovery package doesn't hit your face. It just hits the minions on the board and will buff up your Light Wardens. And then if you get Keleseth, Light Wardens are now 2/3 and can exponentially grow and have one more butt point, as I'm sure Hat would give them, to make their staying power on the board that much better.
I'll
and then
allow
a
it.
Void Ripper in Ginky's list. So the Void Ripper is likely for the same package as what you guys are predicting one of their worst matchups is. That would be, in this case, would be Token Druid is one of the worst matchups. And also I found that this card is actually not so bad when it's not in a favored matchup. Just gives your minions a little bit more staying power, because most of their health and attack are usually only 1 point off. And flipping a twice healed, how would I say this? If you heal for 2 times on a Light Warden, and then you play Void Ripper, that thing now has a lot of health and can still grow. So this thing makes those things, this Void Ripper turns can be pretty ridiculous long term if you can get them off. And then he runs Doom Guards instead of a Leroy Jenkins. Sorry, double Doom Guards instead of 2 Sea Giants that Rivius runs. So the difference here is that Rivius runs 1 Fungal Enchanter, 1 Life Drinker, so that he can run Leroy and Glinda. And then Ginky swaps out the Sea Giants for Doom Guards for more punch. And then the one other difference is that you have a Void Ripper in place of a Spellbreaker. So those are other options in your disposal. And the Glinda can get pretty ridiculous on turn 7. If you play Glinda for 6, play Voodoo Doctor for 7, and then you can unload Happy Ghouls onto your board and make them grin just a bit more that day. The rest of this is pretty self-explanatory. You play Zoo like you normally do. You got Despicable Dreadlords. You've got the whole other packet with Serenite Chain Gangs and Fungalmancers. And then you got Tar Creepers, which aren't as great, but turns out if they don't want to attack your Tar Creeper, you can punish them with a really nice Fungalmancer turn afterwards with a 1-drop. Works out pretty well in your favor. And of course, Light Wardens turn into very quick Flame Imps, even if they don't get to be gigantic. If you can just heal them once, it's actually fine. That being said, how do you beat this deck is probably what you're wondering, because a lot of you aren't going to be playing it that quickly if you're not familiar with how you're playing it. So, Hat, what are the matchups that suck against, or that are really sucky to play against when you're playing Zoo?
Well, from what I learned in the pre-show, it's what my co-hosts are playing. So, co-hosts, what are you doing to smash this deck and saying, why are we talking about this? I beat it all the time.
Okay, so I don't beat it all the time, but I found that Quest Warrior is a solid answer to it. It's a big reason why I picked up Quest Warrior and have been playing it so much, just because your removal lines up okay against them, and you can kind of grind them out over the course of time. They are a little bit better against you than, say, Odd Paladin, because it feels like you can always remove the Odd Paladin's board, and sometimes the Fungal Mancers, if you let any of their minions stick, they can get out of hand quickly. But generally, Quest Warrior is pretty good. You can do okay against it with Shadowwalk Shaman. I think that's why you've seen quite a bit of that recently. And I believe Appa has some Druid decks that he's had success against them with.
Well,
Is that right?
Yeah, I haven't played against this deck too much, but I still haven't lost to it yet. But I understand the power of it, and I've been playing a little bit of Token Druid and some Taunt Druid, which I know is supposed to be a favored matchup for Zoo. But I mean, whenever you just Wild Growth Nourish and then Brocart on like 6, I don't think they're winning that one.
Get those blowout games, of course. Yeah,
yeah, exactly. So I don't have nearly enough sample size to talk to the Taunt Druid thing, but I can understand why it would be a difficult matchup.
Appa hasn't gotten blown up by the Voodoo Doctor double Happy Ghoul on turn 2 either. So
oh, that's so
that's
gross.
brutal.
I was playing on the train a couple days ago, and I was on the coin. They went turn 1 Librarian coin, Doctor my face, double free 3/3, and my opponent elected not to continue that game. It was super gross, and really, there's going to be some draw variance there. Yeah, I thought so. Opponent did not think so, but I took screenshots. And really, the matchup spread is still being figured out as the deck gets optimized and as people learn to mulligan. Because I think the most important thing to talk about is, where did Zoo come from? What happened? Because on June 30th, it was not being played, and on July 1st, it was rank 1 legend, and now it's the number 2 most popular deck on Vicious Syndicate for the last 3 days. What happened? And how did this
Miracle
meta?
Rogue.
So
yes,
that is definitely one of the things. I think even bigger than that is that the most popular Warlock deck before this was even Warlock. So whenever you would play against a Warlock, you would mulligan as if you're going to play against even Warlock. So you're looking for cards like Naturalize, things to deal with really big threats, and then all of a sudden your opponent is playing all of these small minions, and it's pretty hard to keep up with it. And the deck has always been strong enough. It's just that people didn't take as much time to really invest into it, especially since when Warlock started out during this expansion, people started with Q Block because that was the tried and true Warlock deck, and then the next logical step would have been Even Lock because it's somewhat similar after the majority of Q Block got nerfed. And so now that people are mulliganing incorrectly against you, you're getting a bunch of percentage points. And I think the reason why the deck hasn't gone away is that it's actually just a solid deck. I think it's definitely worth playing. It's way more budget friendly than a lot of the other decks that we might talk about on the cast. So I think it's very much worth your time to at least try it out if you have the cards, or hopefully you can get something out of this. I'm sure you will play against it on ladder. Expect it on ladder. It's going to be much more common than Even Lock now, so you can mulligan accordingly. But overall, just if you can't do that, Stan Sifka made a really fast legend push with it and did very well. So check out his VODs, and he'll definitely give you a good idea how to play it in a lot of different matchups. But I wanted to talk about it this week just because it's so hot, and I feel like a lot of decks, we kind of belabor the point before getting to it, and then by the time our episode comes out with the deck, it's kind of old news, and this is fairly new. So
also, by the time this is hitting your ears, there's a good chance that people have already made iterations on this and changed the package from being burst-centric or tech-centric with Sea Giants to being something different. But what you need to understand is what is the core in the list. It's something that Ray, Blister Guy, does really well in those infographics. So this is a list that is basically two deck lists deep on the infographic that could have 10 lists. So keep that in mind when you're looking at these lists. They do have essentially the same things that they're trying to do. They're trying to shore up their weaknesses with the top end, but they go about it in different ways, by having burst with Soulfires and Doom Guards, or having burst with Glinda and Sea Giants. So they're trying to shore up the weaknesses with tech and top end finishing. But I think that's going to have to do it because we're really long on time, and I believe Hat still wants to hit one more thing.
One more thing. Yeah, we just really want to talk about how Zoo seems to bring everyone together, because I've talked to maybe 4 or 5 people this week, including all 3 hosts of Velen's Chosen, and Grant just crept up on my games last night and is like, is this deck good? Can I play it? And then I messaged to Eve, and she's like, "Hey, can I play Zhou?" And everyone just has this memory, if they've been playing Hearthstone for a while, of when Zhou was good, because there was always some point where we all identified with Zhou. It was the cheapest, best deck for a while, teaches you about card advantage, and is generally strong in the metagame. So it's pretty great to see how people are able to adapt to this metagame and find that the control meta we had last month versus the more aggressive meta we have right now is bringing in people that have different styles of play that maybe they weren't getting to play before. So I'm really glad that the diversity of this meta continues to change. Okay, so we have one more topic, and this is normally even longer than we go, but we want to talk about, there was a really interesting discussion. I had a friend of the show, Lindsel Tinsel, on Twitter, Linz Rochelle. She was talking about her ladder experience. We wanted to talk about that briefly, so let's jump into that.
Rock is dead.
So, this is a topic, we're going to touch on it, we're going to start the discussion here, but I want to make sure we're not finishing discussion. This is one that we really want your feedback as listeners if this resonates with you or with someone you know. But Lindsay said she generally ladders in the rank 25 to rank 20 range, and made a comment about how how unpleasant it was to kind of play Hearthstone at that level these days because of a limited time commitment that she had always been making. But whereas before, it was an investment to generate progress over time. You can kind of see, I hit rank 10 last month, can I hit rank 9 this month? Or even, I hit rank 18, can I hit rank 15, so on and so forth. But now there's kind of this narrower band of every month I play the same amount of games, I get to the same top rank, and I regress to the same bottom rank. I go from rank 25 to rank 20, and then I drop back to rank 25, and that's it, because the lower ranks used to be 2 stars each, and now they're 5. The ranks from 20 to 15 used to be 3 stars each, and now they're 5. 15 to 10 used to be 4 stars, now they're 5. So many more games, and we did the math that to go from rank 25 to rank 20 now, even without losing stars below rank 20, it's 38 games if you win 2 out of 3. If it's 50-50, it's 50 games, whereas before it was maybe about 10 to 15 games total for the month, and Lindsay said she would normally get to about 17. And in addition, the factor that matters here is that 90% of the games are now 10 minutes or more, because players at those rank bands are being matched against each other in a more similar skill cap. Now, Lindsay said she enjoyed that the games were more challenging, that they took more mental investment, that part was fun, but that the feeling of progression, which kind of ties into a couple things we've talked about in this episode, really just didn't feel as relevant. And Rob, I wanted to toss this to you because I think it aligns a lot with what you've talked about in this episode, and it's a little bit more invisible to us in the show because we're so used to starting rank 5 hit legend, rank 5 hit legend. And while we can hear about it, we don't necessarily experience that difference between stable and boring, and seeing if there's a lot of overlap now.
I mean, when this first system was announced, we talked about this exact thing on Velen's show. That it's going to be great for lots of things that have to do with keeping skill-tiered players within a skill tier, especially if they're not willing to put in the time and the effort to maintain it. But for those of us who either don't have the skill or ability or the card pool or any mixture of issues in order to climb and continue out of that month to month, day to day, week to week, then the progression aspect of the competition side, which we mentioned prior, is going to be an issue for you. And the other side is this has a secondary effect on the article we read, which has to do with people who are very good who don't play much. And I'm not saying that I'm very good and don't play much. I'm saying I'm at least average and better than the average player, so above average and don't play very much. So for those type of people, it gets even more frustrating because you've been at certain places and can be there consistently, and yet you are not there based off of the progression or the system or whatever you want to put this in the competition mindset. But for me, even before they did the ladder rollout, I always thought that after they announced this that it wasn't really changing anything as far as motivating me to play more. All it is it felt like to me a fundamental change in the ladder that fundamentally splits up players more and makes it just as equally as frustrating to climb if you're not willing to play every day or every week. And that's something that I think that people need to realize. If your goals are aligned with specific things that are competition based and progression based, right? You want to progress to a certain rank, but it requires you to have this certain level of continuity and understanding and progression and competition, and I'm using the word competition as a label, not necessarily as an accurate adjective. If you guys catch my drift, I'm thinking of like competing and playing better and being a good player. If those things aren't aligning, then you're going to have a lot of trouble climbing. And a lot of people have this discussion when Legend is always brought into the equation, right? I know that you guys talk about it consistently. I know Steve mentioned it on Off Curve recently on his anniversary episode. I know that we talk about this almost, it feels like every quarter. All of the shows kind of make their rounds to talk about how Legend isn't the ultimate goal, but it can be eventually. Making that your goal right here and right now is also something that is like, I don't know. Appa, I have to think this is what we talked about when you talked on the Omnic Lab about hitting Diamond. It's like Diamond isn't something that everyone's going to hit in any game. Like you play League of Legends, you play Overwatch, you play Heroes of the Storm. It doesn't matter. Every player can or ever will even be at the level where they can maintain the skill that is required to play at this rank. It's just not something you can do. Hearthstone is a decision-based game that has a lot more progression orientation up until a certain point, and then there's a very steep drop-off with skill overlapping with progression. And when you want to look at this ladder system, it's just flat out complicated. You know what I mean? Like it's just flat out something that you can't really put into words that you're like, I want to play the game, but then I queue up like 3 games and I feel, like I'm done. Because that's honestly what happens to me. It's like, it doesn't matter if I'm rank 15, rank 20, rank 25, rank 5, legend. I feel like if I'm playing 5 games, I feel like I'm good for the week. Whereas some people are like, they play 5 games and they're like, that was a good warm up. You know what I mean? I want to open it up a little bit outside of the monologue now. What are you guys thinking? Where are you tracking here?
So I actually had a very similar experience with an acquaintance of mine. I went and played Magic the other day, and one of the guys at the shop plays a decent amount of Hearthstone, or used to play a decent amount of Hearthstone. And since the changes, he said that basically he can kind of shoot up to rank 5, but he has no interest in ever shooting for legend. So he says he plays significantly less than he did before the change. And I don't know that that's necessarily a bad thing. At least from my perspective, I feel like as long as you still feel like spending money on the game, which I don't necessarily think that everybody should spend money on the game, but if
it's not necessarily
you still
good metric either, right?
Well, I just think that if you still feel like it's worth it to spend money on the game, even if you're playing a lot less, then that's a good thing for Hearthstone. But it is really worrisome that if he's playing so little that now he doesn't want to make the pre-order at the start of the for each expansion, then that's, I think, really bad for the overall portion of the game, just because we want people to still spend money on the game. We want Blizzard to want to keep making the game because people are spending money. Like, I'm not saying that they should be really greedy with all the changes that they make, but we want Blizzard to be successful because we want them to invest that back into making the game better and better. So does this kind of thing that's been happening ever since that patch that's causing people to play less, is that going to cause them to also spend less money? I don't know. It's up to kind of see what happens. We'll know a lot more when the next expansion comes out. Well, we won't know a lot more, but Blizzard will know a lot better how much fall off there was between the last pre-order and this one, and how much less people are spending if they're spending less. So
Yeah, this is a complicated issue, and if any of us knew the immediate answer, we'd be game designers at Blizzard. But I think it's ultimately that there's clearly some kind of disconnect between the ladder experience in different brackets of people's time investment, skill investment, and money investment. And Blizzard has to invent a system in some way that works for all levels of the system, but most importantly, works for the people that keep the game going on a casual basis. Because I think you can view your professional or aggressively committed players, right? The ones that shoot for that rank 5 or legend grind every month. You don't have to court them as hard, but you do have to court the players that are on the verge of, I'm not sure if I should play or not. I don't really care about it. Make it easier for that player to get in and push. And we want to open this up to you as listeners. If you know anyone that you can connect with, or that you are in this, or you are having an experience like this, if it's in standard, if it's in wild, if it's a friend of yours, if you used to play a lot and now you play less, if you used to play less and now you play more because of the ladder changes, let us know. We want to start this conversation here, but we want to make sure we get as much perspective as possible to make sure that we're having a nuanced discussion that really understands what our average player is going through. And we also want to make sure that the episodes do not take up the entirety of the storage on your phone. So I think it's time that we ask a very much needed question.
How long can this go on?
And maybe I should have known that having me and Rob on the same episode would have been both fantastic and difficult to contain. That'll happen, but you know what? I'm glad that we got this going. And Rob, thank you so much for taking time out of your day and week. I'm glad that we were able to line it up with the holiday and get you on the show. We have a lot of other people to thank. Stefan L. for letting us use his cover. Check him out in his channel linked in our show notes. Big thanks to Hearthstone Top Decks, beerbrick.com for deck lists, and Hearthstone Tournaments on YouTube for tournament VODs. Show notes for this week's episode are on our website at coinconcede.com. You can support our show at patreon.com/coinconcede. Join us every week live at twitch.tv/coinconcedepodcast. Join our Discord at discord.coinconcede.com. Email us at coinconcede@gmail.com. Follow us on Twitter at coinconcede. If you want some swag, head over to shop.coinconcede.com. Big thanks to our producers, Arrow and...
It's so
Fluffy. We want to give thanks to our partners over at Swaggo Gaming. We're recording next week on Thursday the 12th, not Wednesday the 11th, because recording the day before an announcement seems awfully silly. So tune in next week, same as this week, Thursday night, but we're normally not Thursday night. And we want to give out our coin concedes this week. Let's start with Botticus. Who do you want to coin concede to this week, sir?
So I want to coin concede to the Daring Reporter podcast, the podcast all about Hearthstone podcasts, because since we did not record yesterday, I was able to be interviewed by them, and I got to talk all about this podcast and how lucky I was to find it, and how it's just been a really big boon towards my overall happiness, and how much it means to me. So check that out. It will likely already be in your feeds if you don't already listen to it by the time you hear this.
Marvelous. And Rob?
Coin Concedes out this week. Well, I have to thank you guys for having me on. It was a pleasure. I know that it's been a long time coming. We've been trying to get it to work. Coin Concede out to listeners of both of our shows, for especially Cap Correlator, Smiley Chris, Steven Sensei, and another listener of my other show, Jan Jinkle, for being wonderful D&D teammates, players, and friends, as well as my wife who plays with us. And we have a session tomorrow, and I am excited. So, thanks, guys.
Thank you. Appa, I see that your coin concede is near and dear to my heart.
I'm coin conceding to sleep because that's what I'm gonna do in like 3 minutes. I'm so tired.
That'll happen. Yes, all this shutter walking and shutter talking back and forth. Well, and I've got a few of them here. I want to give a shout out to Mike Lowe and Ziggy Sarah for their upcoming podcast that they are launching soon. And I'm going to double coin concede to Mike Lowe because he beat me in UHL, ending my season. He is in the UHL semifinals that are happening tomorrow night, which I'll be casting with Wicked Good, Red Knight versus Aliri. And then Mike is playing playing somebody else. I should know who it is. I don't know who it is. Mike is playing... No, Nate. He's playing Nate Wolf on Saturday. Go watch that game. It's totally awesome. Shoutouts to Bunny Hopper. Thanks for the packs. Shoutouts to Cora and the HCT production squad. She was a great host. It was a great production, and that dress was amazing. And shout out to Robobson for looking at my tilted Shutterwalk replays at 5 in the morning Eastern time and saying, you know, this is what you did wrong, and this is what you did right. So, Rob, where can we find you? Plug your stuff.
Twitter, NotRob. Instagram, NotRob. You can find Velen's Chosen at velenschosen.com. If you like Overwatch, omniclab.com. If you guys want to hear about the D&D, you can go look that up at, what's that website called? I want to say it's called Concept Craft, if that's what you're looking for, but did an episode where I talk about a little bit more of motivations within characters and how we play the game. Check that over at conceptcraft.libsyn, I think, or libsyn.boring.conceptcraft.rob. I don't know. Like, you can look for it. Use Google. That's what it's there for.
Yes. You can find Rob at Google. Thank you, Rob. Botticus, where can we find you? Is it also the Google?
Yeah, just Google Botticus. You'll probably find me. Except on Twitter, it's at BotticusHS because there already is another Botticus before me.
BotticusHS is the top result. Coin Concede is the third result. The other Botticus is the second.
Awesome.
Yeah, great. Appa?
You can find me on MSN, Ask Jeeves, Yahoo.
It's okay. Googling Appa doesn't work as well. I tried it. There's a lot of stuff. The American Probation and Parole Association would like a word with you.
All right, anyways.
Plug your MySpace, damn it.
MySpace. Oh, God. Okay, so you can find me on Twitter at Appa_HS. You can find me on Twitch at AppaHS, no underscore. I'm streaming on there, so come stop by, have a good time, watch me lose some games with complicated decks and learn why I lost with them while we go. So, yeah, that's where you can find me. Also, Ask Jeeves.
Keep bum.
Yep.
World.
And you can find me. My ICQ number is 11984431. You can find me on AOL Instant Messenger if I'm not set to offline mode. My Friendster, I actually got banned, but it's not my fault. And you can find me on Twitter at RidiculousHat, on Twitch.tv at RidiculousHat, and Discord, wherever conversations can be had about Hearthstone, type at RidiculousHat, and I will probably show up there. And we are getting delirious, so keep calm and rogue on, and if you see us on the ladder, coin concede.
Coin concede.
Coin concede.
Coin concede.
Take cold comfort in your victory. You win. I can rest now. You win. For now. Now, your victory proves nothing.
The day is yours.
I choose death. You have triumphed. This time. This heart